computers are working tonight. I just thought I would have it for you. We had such a mess. I know. We had such a mess last week. You never know. I was telling we need to get an abacus to keep track of where we were.
Mr. Weddleton,
Here.
Mr. Rivera,
Present.
Mr. Steele,
Here.
Ms. LaFrance. Here. Mr. Trainee,
Here.
Mr. Dunbar,
Here.
Mr. Croft,
Here.
Mr. Peterson,
Present.
Mr. Constant,
Here.
Ms. Nemboski,
Present.
Mr. Dyson. Chair Trainee, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a full house tonight. Looks good. Mr. France, could you listen to the pledge, ma'am?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item in business, and minutes of previous meetings are on none. Thank you to the clerk's office. Appreciate you getting them all where they need to be. Mr. Mayor, you're next, sir. Mayor's report.
Nothing to report. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Chair's report, we're down to one laid on the table item tonight. So I appreciate the administration help with this because we're down to just one laid on the table item. Makes it a lot easier for us. Thank you. We now go into committee reports. Mr. Whittleton, I'll start with you, sir.
Sure. The Committee on Economic Development Committee met last week, and we've got 3 marijuana licenses on the agenda this evening that we'll be talking about. Thanks. That's it. Thanks.
Mr. Rivera, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Instead of a regular Assembly Committee on Homelessness meeting this month, we are going to be going out and volunteering in the community. So we will be doing on December 19th from 12 to 1:30, we will be feeding lunch at the Downtown Hope Center. I will ask the clerk's office to send an invite out to everyone soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, sir.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. France, ma'am.
No report, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Dunbar, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So first, tomorrow the Transportation Committee will be having a hearing from 12:30 to 1:30 in the Mayor's Conference Room on the 8th floor, and we'll be discussing the long-awaited taxi ordinance. Still be in draft form, but I think we'll have a good discussion. Second item, on Monday, December 18th, Senator Bill Wielechowski, Mr. Chairman, and myself will be holding a town hall related to snow removal. It will be held at Wonder Park Elementary School from 6 p.m. to 7:30. We will be joined by representatives from the state and from the municipality, and the public will have a chance to comment, ask questions about snow removal last year and plans going forward, and also make suggestions. So I invite my colleagues, and I very much hope to see people there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Croft, sir.
Yeah, the Public Safety Committee will meet tomorrow and then again on December 20th. Tomorrow's meeting will be primarily about the bail schedule. In the discussion about SB 91, SB 54, there was a lot of talk that some of the concerns we were seeing were related to 91, some to the number of police officers, a lot of different causes, but one of the things that kept being brought up is the change in the bail schedule. So we've invited Presiding Judge Morris of the 3rd Judicial District, who had a hand in writing that, to come. He's graciously accepted. I've sent to all members or asked staff to both the bail schedule as it sits, and I've sent to some members questions that I'd like to ask about it. Of course, any members invited. So I think that's an important part of the piece that we've been looking at on what's going on with public safety. In addition, at tomorrow's meeting, Wednesday the 6th, which will go from 11 to 12:30, we'll get a report by APD, particularly concentrating on some of their successes on stolen cars, some of the emphasis that they've placed on that, as well as drunk driving. We may have short reports on work service and next door. And then on the December 20th meeting, that's also on a Wednesday, but that's from 12:30 to 2 because of homeless committee meeting beforehand. That'll be primarily concentrating on heroin and opiate addiction, all the way from the methadone clinic and what to do about treatment, how to get people off once they're hooked, to how do we keep prescription drugs and opiates out of people's hands, how do we get overdue drugs disposed of properly. So because there's mounting evidence that that's a lot of what our public safety problem is causing our public safety problems, we're going to dedicate a whole meeting to that. and maybe just a small portion on the idea of the municipality, for the first time ever, prosecuting felonies. That's been the state's jurisdiction for a long time, but with state cutbacks, they're just not. We are often sending what was charged as a misdemeanor up, but could be and should be charged as a felony, and they're not taking it. So that'll be on December 20th from 12:30 to 2.
When did you say we're having the meeting on bail schedule?
That'll be tomorrow, 11 to 12:30 in the mayor's conference room.
You might talk to the municipal attorney and see if it would be good for some of our prosecutors to attend that. Because they're going to be the ones that are in the field dealing with this. And it would be good to get their input into it, to see if there's anything we can do to help them.
Great. We'll have Seneca
Thank
there.
you, sir. Mr. Peterson, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On November 22nd, the Ethics and Elections Committee meeting had a meeting at our election center down on Ship Creek Avenue, and we discussed the ongoing mock election. Right now, we're having a mock election so that we can test our equipment to make sure it's ready for the election next April. And so if any employees out there watching, if you haven't mailed your ballot in yet, you have until next Tuesday is the deadline, I believe.
Did every assembly member get that in the mail? Anybody here not get it? Okay,
Yeah, I've already voted and mailed mine in, so
good.
thank you.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Mr. Constant, sir.
There was a little mistake on the cover of that ballot, but I did get it. It said must vote on election day, so.
Okay. Thank you, Chris. Ms. Dombrowski, ma'am.
No report.
No conflicts? No report? Okay. Mr. Dyson, sir.
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Appreciate that. Just to let the body know, when we get down to item 14C, I want to move to postpone that till the second meeting in January 2018. We're working on an S version, and we need some time, and I appreciate the indulgence of the body. I know it was scheduled for tonight, but I would appreciate the body when we get down to that. We'll just move to postpone it till the second meeting in January, which will be the 23rd. I would appreciate the body on that one. What?
14C.
14C, that deals with Beans Cafe, Brother Francis, and some of the hospitals here in town. We're working on an S version. I think it's more responsive, so I want to see what we can have about the second meeting in January. So now we're down to addendum agenda. Mr. Dunbar, sir? I'll need a motion on that and laid on the table items. You got one.
Motion to incorporate the addendum to the agenda and the laid on the table item.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second? Second. You got that, ma'am? Okay. You want to read them up, sir?
Sure. So addendum to the agenda, item 9B4, resolution number AR 2017-384, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving the transfer of a controlling interest of municipal marijuana cultivation license M10284 for Broken Dirt LLC, DBA Catalyst Cannabis Company, stating the Assembly's non-objection to the transfer of State of Alaska marijuana license number 10284 for the same establishment respectively, and authorizing municipal clerk to take certain action. Midtown Community Council Chair Trainee. Item 9B5, resolution number AR 2017-385, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving the transfer of controlling interest of municipal marijuana retail license M11638 for Broken Dirt LLC, DBA Catalyst Cannabis Company, stating the Assembly's non-objection to the transfer of State of Alaska marijuana license number 11638 for the same establishment respectively, and authorizing the municipal clerk to take certain action. Midtown Community Council Chair Trainee. New business. Item 9D7A, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 804-2017A, change order number 3 to contract 4400000188 with Resource Data Inc. RDI to provide for professional information and technology services on an as-required basis for the municipality of Anchorage, Municipal Light and Power MLMP, $140,000 Purchasing Department. Item 9D10, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 815-2017, application for transfer of ownership controlling interests of package store liquor license 1358 for Safeway Inc., DBA Oaken Keg 520, Airport Heights Community Council, Municipal Clerk's Office. Item 9D11, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 816-2017, application to transfer of ownership controlling interests of package store liquor license number 4167 for Safeway Incorporated, DBA Oaken Keg 2628, Abbott Loop Community Council, Municipal Clerk's Office. Item 9E2, Information Memorandum Number AIM 146-2017, Quarterly Bar Safety Hour Permit Report, August 16, 2017 through November 15, 2017. Chair Trainee. Item 9F10, Ordinance Number AO 2017-165, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly submitting to the qualified voters of the municipality of Anchorage at the next regular municipal election a ballot proposition amending the Anchorage Municipal Charter to allow employees of any police department to enforce parking violations and thereby enable the Assembly to delegate parking enforcement to the Girdwood Valley Service Area to the Whittier Police Department. Assembly members Weddleton and LaFrance, PH 1219-2017, accompanied by Item 9F10A, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 814-2017. Item 9F11, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 817-2017, Planning and Zoning Commission appointment, Seth F. Anderson, P.E., Mayor's Office, Public Comment 1219-2017. Item 9F12, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 818-2017, Zoning Board of Examiners and Appeals appointment, Michelle McNulty, AICP, Mayor's Office, Public Comment 1219-2017. Item 11B3, Ordinance Number AO 2017-130S, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code Sections 1520-020 and 1520-120 to reduce the notice time for public nuisance abatement from 15 days to 10 days and provide a sunset date of July 1st, 2017. Assembly members Croft and Dyson, accompanied by 11B3A, Assembly Memorandum Number AM 685-2017A1.
I think it was 2021. I thought you read
Oh,
2017.
I'm sorry. So in that item, it was July 1st, 2021, not 2017. Late on the table item, item 9F13, an ordinance authorizing a short-term lease for an overflow shelter in an amount not to exceed $10,000 per month. Is there any additional thing that needs to be read into the record for that?
Is there any objection to the inclusion of the addendum and laid on table items to the agenda? Asking unanimous consent for its inclusion. Not seeing any opposition, Madam Clerk. That's accomplished by the body. Now I need a motion from the body on the consent agenda as amended with the addendum and laid on table items. If I get somebody to make a motion on it, to approve it, and then a second.
Move to approve the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Now we'll go to the assembly members who want to pull items for further discussion. Mr. Dyson, you're first.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to pull 9D5, 9D6, 9D9, and 9F8.
Okay, 9D5.
Roger.
9D what?
6,
What, sir?
9D9, and then 9F8.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Bowski, ma'am.
9 Bravo 3.
Thank you. Chris.
9 Delta 3,
What, sir?
9D3,
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Peterson, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No items this evening.
Thank you. Mr. Croft, sir.
No items to pull.
Mr. Dunbar, sir.
9 Delta 7.
Thank you. Mr. France, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No items.
Thank you. Mr. Steele, sir.
No additional item, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Rivera, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No items.
Thank you. Mr. Whittleton, sir.
I'm going to read all three, but I think at least two have already been called out. One is 9F5, which I think Mr. Dyson did. 9D9,
You say 9F5?
right, and it might be going backwards here, sorry. 9D9 and 9D5.
Okay, he pulled 9D5 and 9D9, but you're the first one to pull item 9F5.
Okay.
Excuse me, what? Amy, did I miss something?
Mr. Dyson also pulled 9 Foxtrot 8.
Okay.
I think Mr. Weddleton thought he pulled 5. but
He pulled item 9F8 also. Mr.
Yeah,
Dyson.
I just was,
Okay.
yeah, helping.
So we pulled, we got on the nines, we pulled item 9B3, it was pulled by Ms. Tabowski. item 9D3, 9D5, 9D6, 97, 99. On the 9Fs, we pulled item 9F5 and item 9F8. Is there anything else that needs pulled? Let's vote then. Let's see if I can get this thing to work. No, but it's not appearing up there. It should appear up there so we can see it.
You have to move and second first. Oh, that's a consent agenda.
You need to get our technician here or what?
Scraps of paper.
Is there any objection to approval of those, the consent agenda? Not seeing any of that thing is approved. We're trying to get the screen to work. Sorry. Okay, now we'll go back to those items. We'll pull for a little further discussion. The first one is item 9B3. That was pulled by Ms. Dombrowski. Ma'am?
Move to approve.
Is there a
Second.
second? Moved and seconded. Ms. Dombrowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not sure who to direct this question to, so I'll just say it aloud and see who answers. So this is an appropriation for an SUV for Department of Health and Human Services. Do we really have to spend $22,622, or can they just use the SUV that the city manager just gave up?
Through the chair, the Muni Manager Mobile is now being used by the SWAT team, so it is not available to DHHS.
Okay, and the funding source for this particular replacement, is it coming out of maintenance and operations, or is it coming out of the operating budget for Health and Human Services? I was a little confused. I don't know how the funds memorized, so Fund 601-800?
Petty cash.
Through the chair, these are now our SAP accounting strings, and I too am not yet fluent in reading SAP accounting strings. Perhaps Melinda can answer that question for us, the Director of DHHS.
No. Not used to it yet.
Through the chair, Ms. Dombrowski, the funding for the new SUV is the operating budget from the
From your department?
Yes.
Okay. And the way I read it, this is replacing a vehicle that you're currently using. It's on your refurbished list, basically?
Yes, it's due to our current vehicle not being able to be serviced anymore, and we need a new one.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to get you a really cool rig, but...
Anything else, Ms. Dombrowski?
That's cool.
In the comments from assembly members, is there any objection to approval of this item? Ask unanimous consent. Seeing no objection, Madam Clerk, that item is approved unanimously by the body. That was item 9B3. Next one was pulled as item 9D3. That was pulled by Mr. Constant. Mr. Constant, I need a motion before we discuss
Yep,
it.
move to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second? Okay, Mr. Constant.
Thanks. And just so I'm keeping this straight, I know we have a few different of these police and fire accounts. This is, in fact, the board that's in charge of the funds that we just sent like tons and tons of millions of dollars to, right?
Through the chair, I don't know if tons and tons of millions of dollars is the accurate characterization, but yes, this is the board which
Millions and millions and
where we
millions
made the
of
additional
dollars.
deposit. Yes.
Okay, and is this individual here, Mr. Vignola? Chief?
No.
No, okay. You know, just to the administration, it would be great in the future if we have folks that are being appointed, that they at least are offered the opportunity to come forth and be here, because sometimes there are questions. And the thing I would like him to know is that, boy, it was a big vote, and I'm not going to forget it for a long time, and I sure hope that he is up to speed on the vote that we took and the gravity of that decision. So, thank you.
How do
Thank you. And there are questions from Ms. Dombrowski, ma'am, on this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've had experience with Chief Vignola. He's a retired AFD chief in the past, and I think he'll be an excellent addition to this board. I've found when I've had issues or wanted to communicate, he was very responsive. And I think when we're about to give a board $68 million to invest, that's what we want, is somebody who's responsive. In addition to the police and firemen, them being in charge of this very huge allocation of money, I think especially having somebody who has such institutional knowledge of the Anchorage Fire Department and IAFF, Local 1264, and the history will be beneficial to the board. So I think he'll be an excellent addition to the board.
And we do have administration people that are appointed to the board also. There are some union reps and there are some administration people on there. So, Mr. Falsey, I think you got appointed to that recently, weren't you?
Yes, the Assembly appointed me that board 4 weeks ago, approximately.
And we trust Mr. Falsey.
What were your qualifications?
Thank you.
He's probably already spent millions.
Anyway, any other comments on this item? Ask unanimous consent from the body. Not seeing any objection, Madam Clerk, that item is approved by the body unanimously. How are we doing? Getting
D6.
close? Okay, thank you.
Where's five?
It's always something with that. You almost think it was run by, I'm not going to say it. Next item in front is item 9D5, and that was pulled by Mr. Dyson. Mr. Dyson, sir.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved to second. Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I could have perhaps got this information previously. I just wanted to know what safety foam is in this instance.
Through the chair, if there are extensive questions, I might ask Trygve Eriksson from the Fleet Maintenance Shop to field those, but the first order answer is this is the bumper safety foam which is installed by Ford in the back to prevent rear-end collisions from being more catastrophic.
Through the chair, that is an accurate...
Identify yourself for the record, sir.
I'm sorry, Trygve Eriksson.
Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
That is an accurate description. The foam itself is about a 4 foot by 4 foot piece, a complex piece that surrounds the spare tire of the Ford Explorer, or as I actually call it, the police interceptor. It is an integral part of the rear crashworthiness of that vehicle. And the police interceptor is in fact rated by Ford to the occupants of the police car can survive a rear-end collision of 70 miles an hour, which I find rather astounding. This piece of foam was modified per the instructions of the aftermarket manufacturer. After it was done, it was recognized by our actual fleet shop that this might impact the crashworthiness of it. The simple answer is it's unknown if it impacts it or not, but it certainly has changed the configuration, albeit in a minor way, but nevertheless it is a change. Ford is unwilling to stand behind the original rating of the vehicle without that. Based on that and the concern that ultimately the city would be in the position of defending our action if someone was hurt, the decision was made to replace the foam.
Mr. Dyson, sir.
Yeah, thank you. This is original equipment, replacing of original equipment?
Yes, the original equipment we modified to provide more carrying capacity. The policemen carry so much stuff in the back of their Explorer that the original equipment cover actually bends down. So what this was to do was to buy a metal cover, and the installation of that aftermarket metal cover involved the modification of the original equipment foam package.
Yeah, all right, thank you. And thank you for being concerned about our police officers' safety.
Sir.
And also the potential for lawsuits.
We have a few more questions for you, sir, if you don't mind. Mr. Whittleton, sir?
All right, well, thanks. Just a couple questions. I've had some emails and phone calls about this that have been real interesting. I have one question. How long have we been, basically, this is not so much about the foam, but about the big metal plate.
Well, the big metal plate is the aftermarket piece, pardon me, through the chair, is the aftermarket piece we installed both to increase the carrying capacity and to simplify the access to all the electronics equipment. The electronics equipment is mounted under this cover and above the spare tire. And without this aftermarket cover, in order to get to that equipment, we have to remove all the accident investigation equipment and all the various stuff that policemen put back there. And it was designed to make it faster for the radio shop to move those policemen when they have a defective radio in and out of the facility. It was a good idea. It just unfortunately had this unanticipated consequence that we're going to have to do something differently.
Can I follow up?
Go ahead, sir.
So how long have you been using that plate?
Approximately a year or a little more, since the very first Ford police SUVs went into the fleet, which is something over a year, I'd say.
Okay, so were we to put this back where it started, where will the electronics go?
The electronics will go in the same position. We'll just have to remove all the equipment from the back end of the police car. When I say equipment, pardon me, the items they store back there, road flares and all kinds of investigation equipment. We'll have to remove that in order to get to that equipment. The equipment sits underneath the originally supplied OEM tray and above the spare tire.
Okay, and we had gotten an email that said that these vehicles can be ordered from Ford with this metal tray in there, and that they cut out the piece of foam. And apparently, you don't really cut the whole piece of foam; it's just a little section.
That's correct.
That they'll actually cut that out.
And what happens is Ford will deliver the vehicle to an aftermarket supplier who will in fact install the same piece we did. But Ford's attitude, and in fact the aftermarket supplier's attitude is, we don't think it makes a difference. And Ford's attitude is, we can't tell you that it doesn't make a difference, and hence we won't stand behind it.
So there's no recall notice about this or anything? It's just, it's somewhat speculative. Is this metal plate causing greater damage or less? Is that right?
That's correct. But although I should say, when it's speculative, Ford has been very specific at saying, we have done no testing and we can no longer insure and tell you about the data we developed in crash testing these vehicles because you've changed one of the crashworthiness components.
Okay, good. And just one more. Is there anything else that's done to police vehicles that might change the crashworthiness?
Not that I'm aware of, although one could look at I notice that Ford does speak to the big bumpers on the front and that sort of thing. In those cases, Ford specifically discusses how to mount them and whether the mounting of the push bumpers on the cars will impact the activation of the airbag sensors. And because the airbag sensors are activated by G-force rather than deformation of the structure, it is Ford's conclusion that they have no impact.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Constant, sir.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Just so I'm clear, what we're doing now is we're reverting these pieces of equipment back to their original status and then discontinuing the practice going forward. So we're not talking about every year modifying and then refixing these projects to the tune of $100,000.
Through the chair, that is exactly correct.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Peterson, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so does this affect the amount of equipment that the police can carry in their cars? Are they going to have to lease some things out that have been used to carrying?
Through the chair, no.
Great. Thank you.
Just one quick question for me, because there's no other questions. Has there been a problem with these vehicles and exhaust emissions overtaking the police officers inside the vehicles? I was looking at a report on that, and Ford wants to deny it, but there's multiple jurisdictions had a problem with their officers and the fumes getting to them.
Through the chair, to my knowledge, there has been no reports of that in Anchorage. I know that the police fleet folks, I'm speaking for them, as soon as they heard those, purchased some low-price carbon monoxide detectors, the kind you see in small airplanes, that were very inexpensive, and equipped all those vehicles with those. And to my knowledge, there have been no cases of carbon monoxide issues.
Steps with those to make sure it doesn't happen?
Every single one.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Any other questions from the body? Ask unanimous consent for approval of this item. Seeing no objection, Madam Clerk, that item is approved. Thank you for catching that one, Fred. We appreciate it. We had lots of questions.
All right. Why
Thank
do we
you.
have electronics? I want to know.
Next item in front of us is item 9D6, and that was pulled by Mr. Dyson, and that is AM 803-2017. Mr. Dyson, I need a motion on that.
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved in second. Mr. Dyson, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Just a minor point to avoid confusion for us old folks. There are at least 2 Northwood drives in municipality, and it would be helpful if you all would let us know which one it is. I deduced it, but it would have been helpful. Thank you.
What?
We're ready to approve that item.
I know. Sorry, we were just talking. Ask unanimous consent on this item. Seeing no objection, Madam Clerk, that item is approved. Next item in front of us is item 9D7. You pulled that, Mr. Dunbar. We need you to move 9D7A on the addendum agenda.
Okay. Didn't we already put it on the consent agenda and pass it?
Well, what we did, according to the clerk, once we pulled item 9D7, we also pulled the A version.
Okay.
So we just move
Is it A?
the A version forward.
Yep. All right. I move item 9D7A.
Is there a second? And this was a request from the administration that we did this. Anything from the administration on this? Okay.
Since I pulled it, could you briefly describe what the difference was? I believe it was just a scrivener's error or some rather small item.
Yes, through the chair, I'll invite Robert Harris to give you the answer. I believe it related to the fund certification. We just cleaned up where the funds were living in which calendar years.
Thank you, through the chair. That's exactly right. This was just,
Technical housekeeping.
when it first went through, we ended up basically assigning all the funds that would be spent in $18 to $17, so we went back and cleaned that up after we had put it through, caught that and fixed it.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Harris. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ask unanimous consent. See no objection, Madam Clerk. That item is approved by the body. Next item that was pulled is item 9D9. That was pulled by Mr. Dyson. Mr. Dyson, sir?
Yeah, thank you.
I need a motion.
Move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Dyson, sir?
Yeah, thank you. Kind of a technical question. I'd like to know how these electric buses provide heat for the interior space.
Electric heater?
Through the chair, I am not aware of that answer, but I'll invite Mark Hallamert from Public Transit. Hopefully he is aware of that answer.
Mark Hallamert from Transit. Through the chair, the model we're getting as a demonstration model is running just through electric radiant baseboard heat.
Can you talk a little louder?
You need the microphone, thank you.
The model that we're getting with the demonstration is running with electric baseboard heat. Production models configured for our climate would have a diesel-fired little miniature boiler, very similar to our current fleet.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, electricity is great for lighting and running electric motors. It is amongst the worst ways of heating any kind of space, and the process losses are huge. Offline after this, I would enjoy kind of knowing what that does to the range of the vehicle when you're pulling that much battery power off in the dead of winter here. I suspect it's significant. And in our climate, that's got to affect the decisions about using electric vehicles.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we can have an offline conversation about that, but I have no objection to this passing. It'll be very interesting. Oh, excuse me. How long does it take to charge the batteries?
We anticipate about 8 hours charging for a day's worth of service, which is 8 hours.
Yeah.
So 1 for 1.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know at the end of the day what it costs us, given our cost per kilowatt hour of power to do that. Once again, it doesn't affect this decision, but I'd like to know. Thank you.
We have a few more questions for you, sir, if you don't mind. Mr. Whittleton has a question. Mr. Whittleton?
Well, I was hoping that they would give us this bus so we could test it in our environment and let them know how well their product goes, but I guess that's not happening. Where's the money come from? Since we are paying?
It's coming from Solid Waste Services.
So why are they paying for a bus?
We'll let Mr. Spafford speak to that.
Okay.
You might want to come down and join us too, sir. More than one of us had that question, so I appreciate you asking that question, Mr. Whittleton.
Through the chair, Mark Spafford, General Manager of Solid Waste Services. We're paying for that bus because next year we're proposing to purchase a electric-powered refuse collection vehicle, and so we thought that this would be a good opportunity for us to test out the drivetrain, which the drivetrain, without getting too technical for the bus, is going to be very similar to the drivetrain that's going to be installed on the garbage truck. And so before we invest, the money that it's going to cost to purchase that type of electric vehicle for garbage collection, we thought this would be a good test to see if it's actually going to work in a cold weather environment, which is how we got involved.
Mr. Whittleton?
I have to mull that over. I mean, maybe we skip the bus, you test your dump truck or garbage truck, and then you tell public transit how well that worked.
Well, it's the cost for doing the bus pilot is, substantially lower than what it's going to cost us to purchase the garbage truck. It's $77,000 to do the pilot for the bus, and it'll be 4 or 5 times that for the garbage truck.
You can't get a lease on the garbage truck?
Not right now. Not that we found from the one vendor that does that.
It's hard to send them back clean. All right, thank you.
Yep.
Mr. Constant has a question. Mr. Constant.
Yeah, it's not really a question, actually. I just wanted the transit director for getting forward and hearing the comments from the assembly members who asked for some progress, especially before we purchase and build a whole new bus barn that's going to serve the next 60 years of Anchorage's citizens. And so it's smart to get ahead of it, and it's good to know that we are going to test out a product before we purchase, even if it's an odd kind of sourcing. So thank you very much to the administration, especially Mr. Hassan.
Mr. Steele, sir.
Yes, you said it takes 2 hours to recharge a battery pack. Don't we just change out a battery pack?
He said 8 hours, sir.
It's 8 hours.
8 hours? But don't we just drive them in and change out a battery pack and send them on the road again?
No, sir. They're very large, very heavy, very well embedded into the vehicle.
They're just in a drawer back there, aren't they, or something?
No, not quite.
Not quite.
Not quite.
No other questions. Thank you, sir. Ask unanimous consent. No, 1, no. Vote was 10-1 then. Don't hear her, Chris. She can vote that way. It looked like you were. It's all right. Next item in front of us, item 9F5. And that was pulled by Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Whittleton?
I'm on
9F5.
Oh, this is the clean air ordinance. I just had a question.
I need a motion to approve.
Oh, I moved to approve. I'm sorry.
Introduce, actually, in a
Introduce. Moved to
second and a
introduce.
third. And a motion to introduce. I need a second and a
Second.
third. Okay. You got it,
Okay.
Madam Clerk?
This has a public hearing date of 12/19, and I wanted to know if there's a problem with making that sometime in January so that community councils have some more time to chew on it.
Through the chair, I don't know that there is a real insolvable problem there. It's certainly our preference to stick with the December 19th timeline, if only because of staff considerations. We have 2 longtime air quality experts in HHS, the second of whom will be retiring at the end of the year. So we'll be a little harder pressed to staff some of these items as meetings as we go forward. We have a work session scheduled between now and the 19th, so that's our preference, but if the community councils need more time, I suspect we can make that work.
Could I, my issues, looking at it, was primarily the part about open burning, and that's an issue on the hillside when we have, the spruce bark beetle infestation still is kind of in our memory. But, a lot of people continue to do work on their lots for fire-wise purposes. And recently, the fire department has quit issuing permits, which has created somewhat of a barrier. So looking at, it looks like this new ordinance did not change the old ordinance at all. What we have in front of us is basically the same old stuff, but there are some holes in it. And I would just want to make sure that people on the hillside have a chance to look at it. I don't think it applies to Eagle River, too, which has similar issues. So I don't know if it's good for them. Why not the hillside? So anyway, so those are some bigger issues, but I think it would be hard to get through the community councils in December.
Administration?
Well, like I say, our preference would be to keep on the existing timeline. If the Assembly does want to move it to January, we will make that work.
Do I make a motion to the second meeting of
Make a
January?
motion to change the hearing date.
I'd move to change the hearing date to the second meeting of January.
Probably the 23rd of
The 23rd.
January 2018.
Okay.
Is there any objection to changing?
I requested to speak.
I didn't see you up here, sorry.
Okay. Well, I was wondering, John, maybe, it does sound like they have these two staffers. It would be good to hear from them. Would it be possible to have public hearing on the 19th, as it's planned now, and then hopefully hear from those staffers and then postpone it? Is that something you'd be open to?
I think that would be fine. Sure.
But
we could still have a work session. They could be there and we could listen to them. So the work session, the date, which sadly I will be out of town for, but
I suppose that's true. So if we were to postpone this till the 19th, we could still have the work session then, or postpone this to January rather.
Yes, through the chair, we're still going to have the work session before now and the 19th.
Either way. Okay, that's fine.
Change the date then to the January. Is there any objection to changing the hearing date till the 23rd of January? Seeing no objection, Madam Clerk. The date for the public hearing has been changed on that item. We still want to have the work session, though, with the experts there. Next item in front is item 9F8. Was pulled by you, Mr. Dyson. It's 2017-383. I'll need a motion to approve that. Our motion is to introduce.
Move to approve.
Motion to introduce was forward, and a second and a third. And a third.
Yeah.
Mr. Dyson.
Yeah, thank you. I think the Director of the Health and Human Services here. Could you come forward, please? Yeah. I'm sure my colleagues have guessed it, but the issue of abortion and parental rights is a huge issue for me, and I'll probably be annoying at various times about this subject, but I ask if any of these funds would be in any way connected with the abortion industry. And the basic answer was no, except in the rare exception when a patient asks for information to make their choices, and the department would give them a list of 4 different community-based organizations that could provide services. Did I get that correct?
That is correct.
And Planned Parenthood is one of those. So anything that has to do with the killing of children because they're unwanted is a huge human rights issue for me. I don't think that's an overriding issue here. The second thing that has been a huge issue for me for nearly 40 years that I've had a lot of foster kids, and that is child sexual abuse. And so I asked for how many girls 15 and under had been come to the city or one of its agencies for reproductive counseling or services. Do you have that number?
I don't have that number. We're still researching that. But when you had inquired about that before, the question was how many people had been receiving services that were minors that had experienced sexual abuse or sexual assault, and that was under 5 people that we were aware of in our system of care.
Yeah, so the background here is that, and I still want that number, the total. I have not gone to primary sources for 4 years. Nationally, the girls 15 and younger are on average being exploited by men who are at least 5 years older, which is statutory rape under almost every state regulation. Girls older than 15, 16, 17, 18-year-olds, tend to be involved with peers and so on. And the national statistics were that the older men who were exploiting the younger girls had an average of 3.5 or 3.7 victims. So they are serial offenders. So then when I held another elective office, then I went to the public health nurses, the pregnancy counseling centers, the school nurses, and so on, and ask how many young girls who were seeking pregnancy tests or birth control were being reported. A startlingly small number. Now, it's always possible that there's something about Alaska that makes the young girls here, the very young ones, not being exploited by older men. I doubt it, but I don't know. So then I said, why aren't you reporting these? Because all of those people are mandatory reporters under state law. And this is a general response, but the response was, well, practically speaking, I'm probably the healthiest contact this young girl has. And if she knows I'm going to rat out her boyfriend, she won't come to me. So there is the nurse counselor making a public policy decision that it's better off to protect the privacy of that individual and her boyfriend than to stop perhaps that exploitation and the potential of 3.7 more girls who will be exploited. I take exception with that, and I understand the counselors who are mostly really care about those kids, but I am very suspicious that the statutory rape is being underreported, and the people who are exploiting these young girls are skating. And so, I've kind of got my teeth set in that, and I hope I'm wrong.
We'll have lots of time on the 19th to discuss this, Mr. Tyson.
Sorry?
This is just for introduction tonight.
Yeah.
We'll have a hearing on the 19th, so we'll be able to discuss this in depth.
Right. And then there's a second issue, and I asked the director, what is the policy about the notification of parents? And you were going to get that for me, did you?
Right. The regulations governing notification of parents, it's a very protective practice where teens receiving birth control are allowed to have their confidentiality. If we have any concern about a danger of harm to self or others, we would have to notify the authorities, meaning APD or Office of Children's Services. But if a teen comes in to the health department per se for reproductive health information, any kind of testing, they are allowed to keep that confidential. But if we are worried about the person's safety, we would have to report. We're mandatory reporters regarding safety. But we would also protect their confidentiality if they're receiving birth control.
Yeah. So once again to my colleagues, and you can think about this before now and the 19th, I am absolutely the opinion that parents know better than any representative of the public service what's best for their kids. And it's my position that the parents ought to be in the loop, except when that will produce a danger for that child. And the fallback or the default always should be the parents are in the loop with virtually everything going on with their kids. So I suspect we have a difference of opinion. I'm quite sure I'm right, but I'd be glad to hear the contrary arguments, and I would encourage my colleagues to engage their minds and their principles about this. And I think whatever it is, the policy ought to be set by the people sitting at this row of desks, not by the practitioners in the field or regulations that are promulgated without our having approved it. These are huge cultural issues and significant issues for the welfare of our children and the preservation of the nuclear family. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Is there any objection to setting this item for the 19th of December? Seeing no objection, this item will appear in front of the body on the 19th of December. I think we'll have an interesting discussion. That completes the addendum to the agenda and later on table items. We're down now to item 12 on your agenda, which is persons to be heard. We've got one individual asked permission to talk to the assembly. Is Zachary Kawi here? Zach, come on forward. I assume it's Zach, but sometimes Zachary it is, sometimes it's not.
Zach's fine, yeah.
Welcome to the meeting, sir.
Thank you. This is a quick update on the Lakeshore Drive issue, which is commercial traffic going down and passing through. A city traffic engineer, yes, I'm sorry about that.
My hearing's getting worse.
Sorry about that. A city traffic engineer pulled the permits for all the jobs this summer around Lake Hood, and they all violated their permits in traveling down Lakeshore. But there has been some resolution in that, and that they gave us people to call in order to report that. The concern is that without a sign being posted, it may happen again and still go not reported. She stated that the APD has the jurisdiction here and said it would be a hard case to even prove in court. So it's not a lot of faith that anything would get resolved. We would like a sign to say, 10,000 pound restriction because it's a collector road. And she told us the criteria were damage to the roadway, which is probably happening with 80,000 pound construction vehicles. And the second is hazardous conditions, which is there's no sidewalk and people walking to Spenard Beach Park on a road with 80,000 pound construction vehicles. That's a hazard and seems like a legit one. It was stated that they didn't want to set a precedent for putting signs where they weren't needed, but I think the precedent you don't want to set is having the concerns go by the wayside and somebody getting killed for an issue that is easily avoidable. So again, at the end of the day, the permits were violated. They have since put some internal policy together to double check all that and make it more available. But it also said they didn't really want to put a sign and said it would be hard to enforce. So that's basically the update.
We've got some questions for you, if you don't mind, sir.
Go for it.
First to Mr. Falsey. We've heard this before, with this particular road before, Mr. Falsey. Has there been any resolution on this?
Through the chair, we think we do have some progress. So to review the bidding, there were 4 projects in the Lake Hood area this summer. The only way to access those projects was with some kind of neighborhood or collector street. Lakeview was one option. The other option was to go around on Airport, I think is the name of that street. The rule in the code as to using the neighborhood or collector streets is that you are not supposed to use those neighborhood or collector streets unless they are the shortest practical route to get to where you were going. For most of the projects, it was not the shortest practical route to get to Lakeshore. Enforcing the rule by posting a sign and posting an APD cruiser to physically watch those trucks is probably not the answer. But by by monitoring the situation and taking potential enforcement action on the permit, we think we can get to largely the same place. My understanding is that the most recent development is that we have reached out to all 4 of the project owners and encouraged them not to use Lakeshore, and in several instances said that their approved haul roads were not to use Lakeshore. We think the situation is resolved now for the winter, and we will watch it again this summer.
Okay, I've got some assembly members. Mr. Constant, sir?
Yeah, thank you. And my question is for Mr. Falsey as well. Would it be prudent or practical to create a fine schedule for these permit holders that if they continue to act in such a way that there's a progressive, painful penalty for them?
Well, through the chair, this is where I may have to look at our traffic engineer. There may already be a fine associated with driving a commercial vehicle on a road improperly. I will say it is incredibly difficult to enforce that rule because as a result of a charter change that voters wrote and adopted in 1997, vehicle enforcement can only be conducted by sworn police officers in person. So you have to really park a cruiser on the road with a sworn officer in it to make an immediate fine decision. Like I say, I think the more effective strategy is for us to look at the building permits and force the haul roads that are associated with that. And we have put new processes in place where we think we can get at it that way. But we don't have high confidence that we will be able to make a significant difference either by putting a larger fine on the books or by posting signs, which are probably not going to change the real world on the ground reality.
Just a quick follow-up. Yeah, I think that you would find an array of citizens, if this continues, who would be willing to set up cameras and provide video footage of license plates to the whomever it needs to be. But I don't think it needs to be a police action. I think a permitting action is the wisest course because those are the folks who are profiting from this process. Thank you.
Mr. Croft, sir.
Yeah, just continue, because this is in my area and been tremendously frustrating trying to get to. Mr. Falsey, all these projects were airport projects? Not state, not us?
I've been doing my level best not to call Stephanie Marmillo up to the podium, but I think I've exhausted my knowledge, and I will now ask the traffic engineer to give us the real answer.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello, Stephanie Marmillo for the record, through the chair. They were not all airport projects specifically for the state of Alaska that I know. The permits were building permits that were under a variety of stakeholders. There was Lake Hood, there was known as Lake Hood hangars, there was Bernard Air Park hangars.
Stephanie, does it matter? As long as we issue the permit, it doesn't matter whether it's the state or a private or somebody else, we can enforce it?
Correct.
So as long as, and did we have those restrictions in? At first I thought we failed to put the restrictions in for whatever mix of reasons, but they were there and it was enforcement that was the problem?
Correct.
And again, solving my misconceptions on this, I thought enforcement was Jack Frost. Enforcement is APD?
For the Title IX restrictions as it relates to commercial vehicles on residential collectors or local streets, that is a Title IX enforcement, and per the municipal charter, it can only be done by a sworn police officer in person. So those restrictions are the problem. When it comes to overweight vehicles and the assertion that they possibly were overweight, that can be done by commercial vehicle enforcement because that is also contained within state statute. But the actual code that is being asked to be enforced is a municipal code. And it's municipal traffic code that can only be done by APD.
When we put in a municipal permit, go in only these routes, and they violate that has to be done by a sworn officer. When they're also overweight, that could be done by code enforcement?
No. So code enforcement can do overweight. Commercial vehicle enforcement, which is actually a state entity, can also do overweight. What we are trying to do as part of the building permit process, the traffic department has to review, and we always ask for a haul route that we review and approve based upon the regulations set forth in Title IX.
Use our building permit process, so it's like they are violating their building permit by how they're doing it.
So we've worked with Jack Frost, who is the acting director of development services, who oversees the building permit process. And as part of that, we are making sure that we document we've always documented it, but we have it easily accessible for those folks who are reviewing the permit site and are getting calls, whether it's about sweeping of the roadways, improper use of the roadways, so it can be enforced that way. And they have the ability that if they are not following their approved building permit, they can stop work on the site.
Great. I'd like to get those building owners, because I'd like to communicate with them as well. But thank you for what you've done on that.
Thanks, Mr. Croft. Mr. Constant, you're next in line, and then
I'll be brief.
Mr. Pearson.
Ms. Ronald just hit it exactly on the head. The stop work order actually sounds like a really effective solution because that's more expensive to those guys than any other tool is, hey, your people are going to get paid and they're not going to be able to work. So that sounds like a good tool.
Thank you. Ms. Pearson, ma'am.
Yeah, through the chair, to the extent it's helpful, I just wanted to call out the charter language, which is very broad and does state that no enforcement of any vehicle violation, whether the vehicle is parked or in motion, may be performed by any other persons other than a regularly sworn police officer. And so because that, as Mr. Falsey referenced, because that charter change was enacted, that does preclude some of the scenarios that you've tossed out as potential enforcement mechanisms.
Anything else from Assembly members? Thank you. Gave us a lot to discuss. Hopefully, we're going to solve the problem.
Well, just one last thing, Mr. Cheney.
Mr. Constant.
What's our follow-up plan? This has now been ongoing for 3 months, and it was the whole summer construction season. And so now we're asked to rely on the fact that the contractors are going to do the right thing. The season is slowed down, and the new season is coming. But what's our plan is my question.
I think Mr. Falls is going to look at this and figure out ways to get contractors in line to make sure they're not going where they shouldn't be. Mr. Falsey, you're the city manager, sir.
That's right. And we will be following up with all 4 of the project owners, emphasizing that it should be using the approved haul routes. And if they deviate from those, we'll look at taking some kind of enforcement action.
And I will continue as chairman to invite these individuals to come here and tell us what's going on until we get resolution with this. But thank you for being here, sir.
Thank you very much.
We're now going to take a really scheduled dinner break. When we get back, we'll do item 11A, notice to reconsider. Assembly members, return to chamber, please. We'll get the meeting started again. We still have a few items to take care of tonight. Mr. Wilton, the first item in front of us, item 11A. You filed a notice of reconsideration, sir. And it was seconded by Ms. Dombowski.
Right, I'd move,
So the question is, shall we reconsider?
okay, so I move to reconsider.
Second.
Okay, she seconded it. Do you want to state why, sir? So, because we have to vote on the issue of reconsideration. It takes 6 to reconsider.
I will, and just in case someone knows, my computer is not working. Should I hit OK? I am comfortable where we ended up on this, in truth, but I was compelled by Ms. Dombowski's points that particularly the 20-inch riser requirement was something that she hadn't looked at before, the people in her district were not aware of, and I didn't feel like it was something that needed to be done immediately, so I wanted to give her a chance to talk to people in Eagle River, maybe come up with some alternatives, or she talked about possibly carving out that district or something. So I just didn't feel like we were in such a rush that it should just kind of roll over what I think are very important community.
Thank you, Mr. Middleton. Ms. Dombowski, ma'am,
Thank
why
you.
should we reconsider this item?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As I said, I've had multiple conversations with members of the Chugach Eagle River Advisory Board and community council presidents, and when they considered this particular item, there was no discussion about this 20-inch riser access panel. I don't remember what we called it. It was kind of, in my view, an afterthought that was never vetted or discussed in the community. And frankly, it was that one amendment. It was the reason I voted no on the entire ordinance, which I thought was a shame, frankly. So it was an issue that I felt could be discussed further, and maybe alternatives or opportunities to get my community involved. And I think Mr. Weddleton comes at this from a different perspective, because in South Anchorage on the hillside, they have discussed this particular issue. But as I said, it wasn't in the original ordinance that was discussed, and it wasn't in the ordinance that was discussed in our community. So to me, this just gives my community an opportunity to actually look at this particular amendment and decide how to implement it, or how maybe we can have an alternative, including the amendment too, or maybe they'll decide they don't want it. But it's one of those issues I felt was important enough. Ultimately, it was the one amendment that made me vote no. And so I appreciated Mr. Weddleton's indulgence to let me try to work this through our community.
If we do a vote to reconsider, when would you want it to come back in front of the body?
Well, I could do one of two things. I could either reconsider the ordinance and then reconsider the amendment and take it out and pass it tonight, if that's what the body wanted to do, or bring it back the end of January, I would say.
Mr. Dunbar, sir, on the issue of shall we reconsider?
Yeah, I think you already asked my question, Mr. Traney. So I guess both for Ms. Dombowski and for the maker of the motion, Mr. Weddleton, is the intention to try to hash this out and resolve it tonight? And if so, do we have language? Ms. Dombowski, do you have any language, an amendment prepared or anything like that? And if not, then, yeah, I guess I'd like to hear Mr. Weddleton's thoughts as well on the time frame of when we would put this off till. Thank you, Mr. Cheney.
Mr. Wilton, sir.
I guess I'd leave that up to Ms. Dombowski, because I'm comfortable where we landed. If she had an alternative, I just wanted to open the door for a couple of weeks for an alternative.
That's fine. Then I would ask to reconsider it and bring it back in January, because it'll give me time at least to meet with the board.
Do you think January 23rd,
Yes.
Ms. Dombowski?
Yep, that'd be plenty of time.
Okay. Mr. Dunbar, sir?
That's all, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any other questions from assembly members on the issue of reconsideration? Then please vote. The question is, shall we reconsider? Please vote.
My vote's a yes.
What?
I vote yes, I can.
The vote was 11-0, yes. Now we have the issue back in front of us. What I'll need is a motion to deal with this on the 23rd of January 2018.
Mr. Chair, I move to postpone action on the item in front of us, 2017-129, until January 23rd, 2018.
Second.
Moved in second. Is there any discussion from the body? Is there any objection to that? Should no objection, Madam Clerk, this item will come back in front of the body, not for public hearing, but just for action on January 23rd, 2018. And that's the first time I've had to use that year. Must be getting close to getting there, huh? Okay, moving on down the agenda, we're now down to item 11B. And there was an S version, I believe, introduced on 11B. Mr. Croft, where's your S version answer?
Laid on the table, it's the very last in your blue packet. Oh, yeah, addendum in the blue.
And that was an S version?
There is an S version. Well, they're finding it. I'd move the S version.
What we have to do is reopen this up for public hearing.
Okay.
Because it's substantially different than the last time. And I think that way we let the public talk about it.
Okay.
If you don't mind, it's easier that way.
Are you sure we have it?
I found
Yes.
it in my blue packet at the very end.
I'm trying to find it in here, so.
I don't have
Where's it at?
It's in the blue packet. They're pretty thin.
No key.
I think it's the last thing in your packet.
There it is. I got it. Thank you. I'm going to reopen the public hearing on this item. This is item AO 2017-130, and this is the S version. This is 130S. What it deals with, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly amending Anchorage Municipal Code sections 15.20.020 and 15.20.0120 to reduce the notice time for public hearing nuisance abatement from 15 days to 10 days, provide a direct sunset date as of July 1st, 2021. So public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to address the assembly for 3 minutes, please come forward. C.H.J. McCurry for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. We'd appreciate it. Welcome, sir.
Thank you. My name is Wayne Hall, H-A-L-L, and I live in Rogers Park. And I want to thank you very much for your efforts to address illegal camping in Anchorage. I support the amendment to reduce the 15-day period down to 10. It's a small step, but at least it's in the right direction. Well, some might claim that even when it's enforced, such limits only move the illegal camps from one location to another. Even so, such movement makes illegal camping less convenient and comfortable for those involved, and it provides some consequence where none would otherwise exist. Such inconvenience will at least discourage and motivate those with other possible alternatives from continuing to camp illegally. And if this is adopted and enforced, it will definitely help to reduce the number of illegal camps. I see no problem in changing the wording from specifically addressing illegal camps to more broadly include public nuisances, as long as enforcement authorities understand that illegal camps are still covered. And I mention this because I think APD has misinterpreted another part of this section, one of the more efficient provisions of the code that deals with signage that would eliminate any waiting period and reduce the need for repeated APD visits. Specifically, it's 15.20.020 B15 G4 provides, quote, abatement of the campsite may proceed without additional notice and after the occupants of the illegal campsite are provided at least 1 hour to remove their personal property, unquote. If the area has been posted with, quote, no trespassing signage, no camping signage, or as not being open to the public, including the posting of closed hours, the abatement of the campsite may proceed without additional notice. Apparently, APD interprets this as applying only to public areas with closure times and not in wooded areas, which is, at least in my area, where most of the illegal camps are. And perhaps this could be clarified with APD. And I just add, to further discourage the movement of illegal camps from one location to another, I'd like to see some additional provision that any illegal camps which were relocated after having gone through the notice period be subject to immediate removal the same way with no additional abatement periods. This could be accomplished a number of ways. I know APD, the camps that I've visited, when they have noticed them, they mark on the tent or on the tarp the number of the notice that they've given, the date, the location. If we find a tent in a different area that's already been noticed, then to me that should also be subject. And that's all I have.
Thank you. Question from assembly members. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. No questions. Anybody else wish to testify on this item, please come forward. Welcome to the meeting, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Marilyn Hauser, Houser, and I live in Rogers Park. I want to speak in support of the proposed language change to make it a 10-day notice instead of the 15-day notice. It's a very complicated issue, I know that. But it's also an issue that's been going on for a very long time, these illegal camps. These are pictures from 2001, August of 2001. I live in Rogers Park. It's the Chester Creek Greenbelt. The camping, the illegal camping has been going on for many, many, many years, and it's only gotten worse and more widespread. Changing the time frame from 15 days to 10 days is just one piece of addressing the issue. We need funding to, Parks and Rec Department, their budget keeps getting cut and cut and cut, and yet the responsibility for cleaning up these camps goes to Parks and Rec. That, to me, doesn't make any sense. But there needs to be money put behind cleaning up these camps. Also, you need to understand that when the campers, the illegal campers, APD goes in there and gives them their abatement notice. You have 15 days, 10 days, whatever, to vacate. APD does not go back and make sure the folks have left within that 15-day period, gotten their stuff together and out of there, whatever they want to take with them. So until Parks and Rec gets in there to clean up the camp, they continue to be in the camp. Again, making the woods off limits to somebody who might like to sit in the trees and watch the squirrels and listen to the birds. APD tells you, don't go in the woods, it's dangerous. So that needs to be understood by this body. I filed a complaint on an illegal camp that's within line of sight from the Anchorage Senior Activity Center. I noticed the camp beginning in September because life is hectic and we're all busy. I didn't actually get online to report the camp until October 26th. That camp has still not been abated by APD. APD has not been in there to tell those folks they need to remove their camp. They were running an electric cord to the senior center, or at least making the effort to do that. That, as a nonprofit organization, that barely has enough money to stay afloat as it is, and yet an illegal camper was going to use the juice from that facility. It's a very complex issue. I know many of these people have alcohol issues, substance abuse, mental illness. However, those of us who live who adjacent to these green belts, to open space, to trees, to things that make living in Anchorage worthwhile, we're being penalized. So I do at least support this proposed change as the first step.
Thank you, ma'am. Question from assembly members. There are no questions. Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Anybody else wish to testify on this item, please come forward. Come forward, sir.
Hi, my name is Tom Lockish. I'm an Anchorage resident since '83, more or less, a little bit in Whittier.
Sir, could you pull the microphone up? We're having trouble hearing this. I want to make sure.
Yes, surely. Again, my name is Tom Lockish. I'm a resident here in Midtown. I've been here a resident since '83, more or less. And I think you're trying to criminalize homelessness here, and I suggest, and you also have an indigenous land claims problem, that you ought to solve here first before you try and waste your money on legal fees against the ACLU. I think you need to put a campground up by the power station and work with Native Heritage Center to make homeless camping available to people, and then instead of, you would have an excuse to take their stuff and put it in a designated homeless area to relieve any immediate safety problem, and then you could resolve the land claim and housing issue later. And otherwise, you're just criminalizing homelessness, and I think that's unconstitutional. I hope they sue you to hell if you do.
We've got one question if you
Yes,
want
sir.
to answer it, sir.
What neighborhood do you live in?
Chris,
Midtown.
hold on for a second,
Yep.
okay? We got one gentleman who wants to talk to you. Mr.
Yep.
Constant?
Thank you, sir. What neighborhood do you live in?
Midtown.
We're in Midtown? What about?
Oh, 33rd and Eureka.
Okay, so I'll be looking closely for a location for a homeless camp there.
Actually, there was a de facto homeless camp right around the corner, and if the city would have put some facilities there, the young lady wouldn't have to piss right on the street. So I got the problem. You have no solution here. Criminalizing it citywide is begging for an indigenous land claim issue to arise here, and I think you got a problem.
Thank you for your testimony, sir. We appreciate it.
Any other questions?
Don't think there is. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? You know you can't resist it. Come on up.
It's like a fly swore to a fly. My name is Ed Larrabee. I live in the Folker Street area. And what you're doing, you're putting the cart before the horse. Exactly. You got to put somewhere where these people can go, like a great big stadium or high school, abandoned high school. Instead of tearing them down, no, they're going to put them right in there and have once again, have a few guards. And if anybody gives them any crud, they can call API and they'll handle it like they should. They'll be doing their job. But right now, what good is this? Okay, you're going to lower it from 15 days to 10 days. Okay, they just move a little while over, and they're set for another 10 days. No. If it is illegal, put posted signs with the times that nobody should be there. I think it's from 11 to 9. And if they're there, put them in that shelter I told you about. You know, because what you're doing, you're catering to them. You're saying, oh, well, you know, we lowered it a little, but you could be homeless and camp there all year. All you got to do is just move around like a chess piece. You see? And we can't afford this. We are on a super diving bomb budget. We cannot afford this. So if it's illegal, make it illegal. If you're going to legalize it, but don't walk the line. You know, don't get on the fence, because you're going to get shaken off. If I were you, first, I'd get these shelters going. Second, make it illegal. If you were there, I don't care if you're native, I don't care if you're white, I don't care if you're black. It's just like when you get pulled over in your car. The cop comes up to you and says, you know, hey, you were only going 20 miles over the speed limit. Now remember, you got 3 more times, and then I got to do something about it. I got to compensate your car or do something with you. Well, you know, the law is the law. If you don't respect the law, give them vouchers like this. Say, oh, instead of 15 days, we'll give them 10 days. That ought to do it. That's, you know, sometimes I think y'all get advice from the Three Stooges, because that's not the way it goes.
If it's illegal, it's illegal. If it's not, don't cater to them. My name's Ed Larrabee. Thank you for letting me be here.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to address this on this item?
My name is Alan Williams. You'll probably all have my brochure in front of you for shelter centers. One of the things that has been done in the Seattle area, that's been done in conjunction with Lehigh Housing down there, is they have taken the program known as Nicholsville, which is a tent city in Seattle, and they've combined it with a program for mini houses where they're using used material to actually build small houses. These are like one-bedroom or studio-type housing with restroom facilities inside of them. Now, when you're chasing the homeless from campsite to campsite, you're not really doing anything unless you give them someplace where they can go. And when you look at giving them someplace to go, Brother Francis Shelter isn't necessarily an option. It's just like some of the housing options that are available in Nevada and in Las Vegas or in Seattle or other places like that. They're infested with bed bugs. And until they deal with that problem, these people don't want to go there. They're not interested in going in and getting bitten up to a point where they can't go get a job because they've got sores all over them. And their potential employers, especially if they work in a restaurant, aren't going to hire them. They have a disease. And that's all they think. So until somebody opens something up, whether it's the city opening up a large warehouse and setting up the ability to be able to go in someplace like that, where they can keep it clean, if at all possible, put some dumpsters out there, put some Santa cans around. Until they've got someplace to go, all you're going to do is you're going to flush them from this park to this park to this park to this park. It's not going to do you any good. You might as well be chasing your tail. It doesn't work. And it hasn't worked for any municipality anywhere in the United States. And you could research that. It's not that hard to find out. You have to provide them someplace to go. Whether that's a warehouse, whether it's a parking lot for tents, it doesn't make any difference. But you have to give them someplace to go where they can go and be safe. Because they're not going to go to a bug-infested housing setup. That just doesn't work. That's all I've got to say on it.
Question with some members. Don't appear to be any. Thank you for being here, sir.
You bet.
Appreciate it. Anybody else wish to address the Assembly on this item? Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body? Mr. Croft?
Move to approve the S version.
Second.
Mr. Croft.
So, appreciate the public testimony. Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Two residents said this is a small but important step to regaining control of our parks. They were from Rogers Park, and I think that's true. Two testifiers said it's not fair if all you're doing is just moving people around, and I think that's true. Mr. Larrabee continues to be hard for me to categorize, so I kind of put him in the, on both sides. But I think it represents both truths of this ordinance, that if all we were doing was just making it quicker to move them around, I frankly wouldn't be interested in it. We, since we last heard this, and in fact last passed it, have provided money for homeless services, a significant amount. The first large municipal, as opposed to pass-through, that anyone can remember, effort in that area. We've also provided 170. That was $500,000 of homeless services to try and find those solutions, to try and put them in housing, to try and provide the alternative that everyone agrees is the better solution, and $170,000 for camp cleanup. So that this can mean something, right? When you just take the days from 15 to 10, if you don't have the people to clean it up, it doesn't matter. So I continue to believe that both sides of this issue are right, and the reason I wanted a little more time, the month, and appreciate the body giving it to me, is we've added some protections. We've both acted on the budget in between, but also this S version, and Ms. Domboski corrected me last time, so I made sure this time I did have a memo that described the changes. Basically, the last time when we lost in court and had to pay $100,000 in attorney's fees, pay our own and then pay the other side, the ACLU made some comparisons to other statutes that we had and how we treated other things. So we took the time that you gave me to look at that and see if some of those could be shortened as well. Ended up just shortening one from 15 to 10, but I think that was a good point. We also put a sunset on this so that we can reevaluate in 3 to 4 years how we're doing, what progress we've made. Because again, I don't think just shuttling around without the other services is appropriate. But this change, to go from 15 days to 10 days, that was the core of the prior version, is the core of the S version, I would argue is still appropriate. It helps us regain control of our open spaces. It's still an appropriate balance for our homeless citizens, and they are our homeless residents, citizens, constituents. But we've added those other protections and assurances. So I appreciate the body's time. I think now it's an even more defensible. I think the chances of it being litigated have been reduced. You can never guarantee anything. And the chances of winning, if you come to litigation, increased. So I'd urge a yes vote.
Thank you. Mr. Rivera, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to applaud Mr. Croft and Mr. Dyson for proposing these changes and for all the input that we've received from various municipal departments. I want to really remind my colleagues, and I think Mr. Croft did a really good job of this, that this only works, this ordinance, changing from 15 days to 10 days, if we maintain the system as a whole. And I think we heard some of our constituents arguing that point effectively. I think we took a positive step to do that, to maintain the system, when we kept the $500,000 for homelessness whole in the 2018 budget and added additional monies for cleanup, which again is an issue that we have heard from our constituents. So I encourage a yes vote, and for my colleagues to really keep their eyes on the system as a whole, finding people, housing people, and stabilizing people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Constant, sir.
Thank you. Just a point of clarification. It was stated previously that this is the first money that the community has put forward for these services, and that is true in a direct sense, the $500,000. But by my calculations, the fire department, at a minimum, spends about $3 million a year of service time cleaning up the mess that we've created up in that part of town. And that doesn't include anything from APD, which has a whole other set of factors and calculus that they use to come to their number of calls. So we're spending millions and millions and millions and millions of dollars on this problem. And I do support this change in partnership with the funding for camp cleanup, with partnership for the funding for additional direct services, and the aggressive work of housing these people that the mayor's administration is doing.
Thank you. Any other comments from assembly members before we vote? Not seeing anyone. Please vote. That's approved unanimously by the body. Thank you, Mr. Croft, for your work on this. Mr. Dyson. Thank you. Next item in front of us is item 14A. Item 14A, ordinance AO 2017-156, ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, amending certain provisions of Anchorage Municipal Code Title 8 to update and amend sections for consistency with recent state statute amendments related to violations of conditions of release. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward, state your name clear for the record, spell your last name, and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing saying none, public testimony is called. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from assembly members. Please vote. We there? 11-0. That was approved by the body. Next item in front of us is item 14B, Resolution AR 2017-3 372, a resolution of the municipality of Anchorage appropriating $125,000 of other fines and forfeiture revenue from federal seizures and forfeitures to the Federal State Fine and Forfeiture Fund 257 for use by the Anchorage Police Department. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record, spell your last name, and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing none, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from Assembly members. Mr. Constant.
Thank you. Do we have any idea of what or who these funds are coming from to the administration?
Is the chief still here? You'd be the perfect one to answer the question, Chief.
Thank you, sir. Acting Deputy Chief Sean Case. No.
Okay.
I mean, the funds are put into a large pool. They come from a pool of our federal agents that we have task force officers that are working for. And basically how it works is when there is either a plea arrangement or a case makes it all the way through the federal system and they have to turn over either property or money, then a portion of that, and the feds do that, the police department doesn't have anything to do with that, they then turn that over to our federal funds. And then every time, obviously, we want to get access to that money, then we ask for appropriation.
Yeah,
Mr. Constant.
Yeah, I just personally have a philosophical challenge with using these dollars if we don't know where they're coming from, because the federal policy is shifting, moving from post-sentencing to pre-sentencing, taking of people's property. And so I won't oppose this because obviously we need to steward the fisc, but it sure would be nice if we could get more information about where these dollars are coming from. Thanks. Who and what cases.
Thank you, Mr. Constant.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Dyson, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Mr. Constant's question is actually a germane one that doesn't apply here, but is a significant issue of civil liberties, civil rights in our country. I've not known of any reports of the city holding property that they shouldn't have, and or getting rid of it. Significant problem on the state level, particularly the Fish and Game and so on, and other places. One of the great delights of my earlier career was putting in state law that you can seize all the assets of a pimp, anything that he uses related to his business, and seeing the troopers with a Cadillac Escalade and some great computer equipment. But anyways, it's a legitimate concern that we all ought to be paying attention to. Thank you. I appreciate what's going on here.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. I would tell you a few years ago, we wrote a city law that allows us to take the cars of pimps. Yeah. And we turned quite a few very interesting vehicles. Then APD used them. We picked up Johns coming up to the cars. It was really cute. We had one guy one time, we picked him up. He rode a 10-speed and tried to solicit a female officer. It was kind of fun to watch his bike being towed away. Thank you, Fred. Thank you.
Thanks.
Please vote on approval of this item. Item is approved. Before we get to 14C, as I told you earlier, it's my intention to open the public hearing and then have the body move to continue this to 23rd of January, because we're working on an S version. We need the time to get the resources to craft this version together, just as we did tonight. So, the public, you can testify on this one, but this isn't going to be the main one going forward. It'll come up on the 23rd. So, open public testimony, and this is on ordinance CO 2017-155, ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, amending Anchorage Municipal Code, Chapter 8.80 to remove the exemptions from fees for excessive police responses for nonprofit and charitable properties, and add on-site security guards at commercial properties as an example of appropriate corrective actions. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. Chief Jim Curry, for the record, spell your last name if you would.
Mr. Attorney, just a quick point of information. As my understanding is that if you testify tonight, you wouldn't be allowed to testify at the next meeting relative to the
Because
S
the S
version.
version will be significantly different, yes. You can testify.
You can, okay, thank you.
There's really no need to do it now unless you want to. Welcome to the meeting, ma'am.
I understand. Thank you. My name is Susan Hurley. I'm an Anchorage resident. I'm a lifelong Alaskan. I have a prepared statement, if you can hear me all right. According to this ordinance, the intended effect is to encourage nonprofit and charity organizations to develop an alternate solution to excessive police calls due to the excessive cost in time and resources. This situation may be true, but it still punishes nonprofit and charity workers for calling for help when they need it, even when that need may be considered in excess. If providing security staff for organizations such as homeless shelters is considered likely to reduce the cost of ensuring the safety of Anchorage citizens, why do we not offer to help this aid in addition to the existing exemption from fees? If the provision of security reduced the police calls by half, would it pay for the cost of providing the security, as well as drawing less time and resources from our Anchorage Police Department? I fear that this ordinance may establish an unfortunate trend with how we as Alaskans respond to our fellow citizens in need. We create rules together as a community to keep each other and ourselves safe. This is our duty to ourselves and to each other as residents of this city. I would much rather see our community looking to find an economic way to provide aid in a difficult situation such as this, and to see our community leaders set forth the example that Alaskans work to ensure the safety of our community rather than punish those who call for help. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Question from some members. Mr. Dyson, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Excuse me, ma'am. Do you work with the homeless?
I'm a nursing student at the University of Anchorage, Alaska. I graduate next week, and I've worked with multiple volunteer projects with my peers in association with the Brother Francis Shelter.
Yeah, thank you for doing that. And to you and hundreds, if not thousands, of other Anchorage citizens that are trying to be a part of the problem. At least there's one person who thinks that they're on the side of the angels and doing good stuff. Don't be discouraged.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all?
My name's Ed Larry II, and now that I'm not freezing as bad, I live in the Falker area, I'll just say that, and you're going to fine them for calling the cops? You know, hey, these are rough areas. These areas, people can get killed. And you're going to fine the people that own the shelters for calling the cops after so many times. Think about it. Where have we gone wrong? All we need, like I said last time, is a huge shelter where they could, the security guards are right there, and they don't get fined though. But everybody else might, because if you find Brother Francis Shelter and the rescue mission, you're going to shut them down. Well, okay, let's shut them down. But it's your responsibility to make these people have the same services as they did before through these Brother Francis shelters and Catholic shelters. You know, you got to have a little mercy. Mercy means really understanding. And if they're freezing to death and somebody tries to take their blanket and they're in front of Brother Francis Shelter, you know, there's going to be a ruckus, you see. And then the person calls the cop, and the cop comes and says, oh, man, 500 times, you know, that's not good budgeting. You need to have a place they can go safely to take over these shelters, because with all these fines, you know they're not going to last. How much are these fines? That's what I'd like to know. You know, They're not going to last. They're on a tight budget too. And so the best thing you could do, once again, bring the cart away from the front of the horse and put it in back of the horse. Get that shelter going. You don't only need about one or two, you know. And with the bed bugs, by the way, there's a special place they could go, get those bed bugs off of them inside the shelter I'm telling you about. But if you try this stuff, you're going to have people out hungry and cold. You know? I mean, and a lot of them are vets. I know them. Some are Green Berets. Or well, yeah, they are because I've seen their tattoo. But you need to think about the future. My name's Ed Larrabee. Anybody got any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Woohoo!
Anybody else wish to testify, please come forward. If not, I'll take a motion to extend public hearing to the 23rd of 2018, and we'll deal with it then. Yes, first.
Move to extend.
Ask unanimous. There's no objection. This item will be back in front of us on the 23rd of January, 2018. It's been a fun year, hasn't it? Next item in front of us is item 14D, Ordinance AO 2017-151, an ordinance authorizing a 5-year lease with 5 one-year renewal options between the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, tenant, and Nelson Company, LLC, lessor, for premises located at 6280 Burwood Street for the Anchorage Police Department Special Response Vehicle Storage Warehouse Facility. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify? Please come forward, state your name for the record, spell your last name, and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no, I'm tough to public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion, Mr. Constant, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Questions for the administration? I'm curious. We're renting space to do this, and this is a substantial lease that's gone on since 2008. What's the rationale for continuing to rent and instead purchasing?
Through the chair, I might solicit any other subject matter experts who know a better answer to that. Robin Ward's headed to the podium, but I don't believe this property is for sale and it's serving our needs now. There may just be not a better option.
Hello, ma'am.
Good evening. Through the chair, Mr. Constant, we would be happy to entertain that, but we would have to have a funding stream, so I think that we will have our chief case talk about that. I know that they need this, but we haven't been approached about a purchase. We know that Nelson is not available for purchase. I don't know if there is another one. We haven't researched that.
Mr. Constant?
Yeah, just we're getting up to several $100s a square foot that we've spent, and that's certainly within the range of what's purchasable. And so at some point, we're going to continue down a path and have bought effectively a property that we don't have title to 4 times. And so it just certainly begs the question, isn't it smarter to come up with a plan to secure a site to do this that is our own, similar to what we do with the parking at Eklutna? You know, it would be crazy for us to pay for someone parking. It seems like we're getting to a point where the expense is really high.
Through the chair, Mr. Constant, it's certainly something that we can sit down with the police department and talk about and see what their budget looks like, but I agree. I think that we should at least explore the opportunity to buy rather than lease.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Any other questions from assembly members? Please vote. That's approved 10-0. Next item in front is item 11E, Resolution AR 2017-3 361, a resolution ratifying a collective bargaining agreement between Municipality of Anchorage and International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 1547 Technicians. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record and spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Whittleton, sir.
I got to say I have some angst about this. You know, it's I find it fairly tone deaf to the situation that we're in right now. This continues 1.5% per year raise. Municipality pays 60% of health care insurance. There's an increase in tool allowance. That's probably all reasonable in some regards. Previous IBEW and trade contracts had similar provisions, but things are a little bit different now. I've gone to the Alaska General Contractors meetings the last 3 years, and 3 years ago I thought there'd be gloom, but there wasn't. They were pretty optimistic. And I went last year and they said, well, things are slowing down a little bit. And I went this year and they are very gloomy. There's some big contractors that have nothing on the books for this summer. And we're going to feel that. These people are the leading indicator for where our economy is going. We have this 7.2% unemployment rate. Our job growth is down 1.3% from last year. Today, Daily News announced more layoffs on the North Slope. North Slope oil and gas employment has fallen to levels last seen a decade ago. So we were significant, thousands and thousands of jobs lost in this state. In the city, in the budget we just passed last week, 2 weeks ago, we dropped 15 positions. And as costs go up, what we have here is we can't even say our tax cap doesn't even go enough to cover the increase to this contract. So we can't even say, well, let's tax to the cap, we won't see a decrease in employment and in services. It pretty much guarantees that there will be decreases in services and employment having contracts like this. The CPI 5-year average is 1.2%. Our population is negative 1%. In addition, we have a contract we did, I think a month or so ago for the fire department, and that was more in line with our current inflation because they skipped a year. We have one coming up in 2 weeks for the APDA, which also skips a year of raises and brings it down more in line with what our real inflation is in Anchorage. So I just see this, in terms of that, this contract is out of touch. Last week, 2 weeks ago, when we did the budget, we cut the library significantly. We heard a lot of testimony on that. That was $212,000, not out of the range of the increased costs that we're facing here. Maintenance operations cut $200,000. Public Works cut $136,000. I mean, these are significant cuts that citizens of Anchorage will see a decrease in services. And I just don't see this contract as in line with the reality of the city and the state and the direction we're going. This to me is a good times contract, and we're not in good times right now.
Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Other comments from Assembly members? Mr. France, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would someone from the administration address the concerns that Mr. Whittleton raised, perhaps Mr. Falsey?
Through the chair, I'd be happy to begin. I think I'll also invite some assistance from our Labor Relations Director or anyone else from the ER department who wants to move towards the podium. I think it is not correct to say that this is a good times contract. I think in years past you've seen much larger annual increases. This contract was complying with the Assembly's direction to cap wage growth at the rolling average of the past 3 years. This contract is sort of the last of the most recent volley of contracts. The negotiations began much earlier this year, and I think the Assembly can expect to see, as new contracts are negotiated next year with Local 71 and others, that the numbers are going to get smaller as the trailing CPI 3-year rolling average continues to put downward pressure on that. Misty, I think I'd invite you to give me an assist here, but I think it is correct to say that this is the best deal that we were able to negotiate with the union.
Ma'am?
Hi, I'm Misty Vignola, Labor Relations Director, through the chair. Yeah, we took in consideration of everything with the budget and the times that we're going through. When we started preparing for this negotiations, the 5-year CPI was 1.6, so we stayed below the 5-year average of the CPI. We stayed within the guidance of that. When we're negotiating, police and fire are a different service class under our municipal code, so we don't look at them as a comparable union. When the negotiations and police and fire receive higher raises, we don't compare them to the other unions, so it wouldn't be fair to compare them when they're coming in lower to maintain their staffing.
Any questions from the Assembly members? Mr. France? That's it. Thank you. Are there comments from Assembly members before we vote? Please vote. That is approved 8-3. Next item in front of us is item 14F. Ordinance AO 2017-150, an ordinance of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly, amending Anchorage Municipal Code Chapter 10.80 to incorporate changes similar to the state regulation changes adopted by the state of Alaska regarding the transportation of marijuana or a marijuana product. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clear for the record. Spell your last name if you would. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote.
Wait.
You had someone in the queue.
John was in the queue, and I
Yep.
also want to hear him.
John wasn't in. I didn't see the queue up here.
He was.
I reset it.
He was.
Well, I'm glad you thought he was. I couldn't see it on the screen. Anyway, John, you were in queue?
I just wanted to point, I just recommend a yes vote on this, and it's a nice little indication where we removed a whole lot of words and simply said what we mean.
I'm trying to reset it. So. Go ahead, John. I was trying to reset
I'm done.
it. What? You're done? Forrest?
No, I think John explained it well. Thank you.
Okay. Let's see if we can get this thing to let's revote again. Is there anything you can push?
Try voting.
One never knows with this computer system. What? Mr. Dyson, Ms. Domboski, I need your vote, please. That's approved 11-0. Next item in front of us is item 14G. Resolution AR 2017-377, resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving a marijuana license, a special land use permit for marijuana manufacturing facility with the license number M11304 YYN Investments LLC, doing business as Hollyweed 907, located at 2429 East 88th Avenue. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward, state your name clearly for the record. Spell your last name if you would. Welcome, sir.
My name is Roland Baldwin, B-A-L-D-W-I-N. I live in the neighborhood of 88th and Lake Otis. The marijuana retail outlet hearing for this case was heard November 28th per my conversation with the planning office yesterday morning. My wife has periodically called the planning office since we got public notice of this case, such that we could have opportunity to express our opposition to it. We received notices of hearings scheduled for November 7th and 21st. She called repeatedly to confirm and was told that the retail and manufacturing cases had been combined and rescheduled for December 5th. Repeated phone calls confirmed that December 5th date. We received no other notice. As noted previously, when I called yesterday to confirm, I was told that the retail portion had already been heard and approved. We received no notice of the change and were misinformed by the planning office as we made phone calls to ensure our opportunity to appear and express our concerns. Whether we were intentionally misled or an honest mistake was made is immaterial. We were misinformed and lost our opportunity to speak out due to actions by those in the know and accountable for that information. We did our due diligence. With proper public notice with proper public notice not having been given, I suggest there are grounds to invalidate the approval given on November 28th for at least as long as it takes to reschedule a hearing with appropriate and accurate public notice being given. I am also opposed to the manufacture of marijuana products at the location in my neighborhood. Do you realize this facility is 86 steps away from a school bus stop? You know what is going to happen. Some legal customer will make a purchase and walk 43 steps. That's the distance from one side of this room to the other and back again, approximately. Walk 43 steps to meet someone walking the other 43 steps from the school bus stop, and within 30 minutes, marijuana products from a brand new source will be circulating the halls of Service High School. Marijuana cookies are on the list of items to be produced and sold. What a great plan. A real positive item to send to school. Production should not be allowed so close to a school bus stop. The last time I was at an assembly meeting, this body, consisting of different personages, was hearing a request by a group opposing the construction of a church in their neighborhood. The assembly acknowledged that the church easily met all legal requirements for the project, but denied them opportunity to build. A church. Churches are acknowledged positive influences in our society. Marijuana use, although now legal in Alaska, but still illegal in the United States, is acknowledged to be an addictive drug with serious negative influences in our society. Are you really going to deny churches the right to build, but allow drug production and sale in my neighborhood? Honorable members of the Anchorage Assembly, we should be ashamed of ourselves if those are our society priorities. I urge you to reject this position to grow, produce, or manufacture any addictive drug products at the location in question. I also urge you to rescind the previously granted permission for a retail sales outlet of marijuana products at this location, at least until the case can be reheard with proper and accurate public notification given. Thank you.
Mr. Whittleton has a question for you, sir. Mr. Whittleton?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to recreate. We had actually had this in front of us, then we postponed it to work with the applicant for the, not for this one, I'm sorry, for the retail and the cultivation. So the dates were changing, but it is a problem that you were given the wrong dates. It's hard to keep up with things if you're just kind of looking at our agendas. Do you get involved with your community council at all?
I'm sorry, did we what?
Are you a member of your community council?
I'm not.
Okay, because that's often a good way. I know if you're, do you live in this area?
We moved in August.
Okay, because your community council is very active on reviewing these things, and they have a committee that does marijuana stuff too, which won't help you at this point, but you'll have other.
We had a home on the hillside for a number of years, sold that, and moved into this location.
Okay. Well, I hope to see you at the community council. You have half a dozen of us there typically.
Thank you for the invite.
They meet the last Thursday of every month at Abbott Elementary School.
And I just, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, John.
I'm sorry. And I do want to, as far as the marijuana operations go in town so far, we have not had real problems. Typically, we've taken beat up old buildings and made them look better. And we have a particular tool with marijuana operations is that we control the license. And if there is bad behavior, such as you described, and it's discovered, we can shut the place down. And I think that is what has really motivated the industry to behave extremely well. And so we haven't had the problems you envisioned, not that they couldn't happen.
And Mr. Whittleton, the problem with that is that the legal customer will be there and buy, and the business will be safe. But what goes on after that, they don't control, and you can't hold them accountable for. But it will happen.
We can hold them accountable for that. I believe we would right away.
I would like to see that. Other questions?
Thank you.
Other questions from assembly members? Thank you.
Thank you.
Sir. Anyone else wishing to testify, please come forward. Welcome to the meeting, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Charlotte Smurthwaite, Smurthwaite. My husband Roland just spoke. According to the marijuana laws, and I'm quoting from the laws 11.71.060, any amount of marijuana found within 500 feet of school grounds or recreation center is classified as a felony. So this facility has established, it's dotted all of its I's, it's crossed all of its T's, and it established that it is the required 200 feet away from the Crystal Daycare Center just down the street, and it's squeaking in with maybe 45 extra feet or so. I'm just trying to understand how it makes sense for that to be okay when you've got the above law in the books that it's a felony to have marijuana within 500 feet of one of these facilities. Also, it's my understanding that the Anchorage Assembly and incidentally Anchorage's community councils have a vested interest in assuring that you represent the best interests of the Anchorage area. If you're supposed to be doing that, what about this? The Crystal Child Care Center is approximately 1/10 of a mile from the site of the store. The Abbott Loop Elementary School is about 2/10 of a mile. Munchies, which is a yogurt store and a favorite hangout for kids and families, is about 2/10 of a mile away from the store, not to mention McDonald's Play Place, which is just a little bit further down the street. Bright Beginnings Daycare Center is about 2/10 of a mile away from the store. Hanshoe Middle School is less than a mile, and Service High School is 2 miles away. Large residential neighborhoods are all either across the street or well within a mile or two of this store. Tell me how putting a marijuana store is good for this area, aside from the fact that it's taking a junky-looking building and fixing it up and making it look pretty. I'd like to talk about signage. Signage is an advertisement. It says there isn't supposed to be advertising within 1,000 feet of school. The signs for this store are clever and they carry messages. What kid doesn't think of Hollywood, and you even misspoke when you were reading and you said Hollywood and not Hollyweed, but what kid doesn't think of Hollywood when they see Hollyweed? And when you think about Hollywood, you think of your favorite actors, you think of your superhero, you think of Marvel comic movies, and other nice, pleasant things. The other sign is just as suggestive. It's an image of the state of Alaska, tenderly enveloped by some pretty marijuana leaves, with a banner across it reading Hollyweed. Frankly, that gives me the creeps. It's like schedules of things to come. I want to talk about how whether or not, I love the movie A Wonderful Life, and you saw the results of certain choices that the community made. One of those choices made it into Pottersville. The other choice made it into New Bedford. And I want you to seriously question what your choices are in terms of what you're making Anchorage. Are you making Anchorage into Pottersville, or are you making it New Bedford?
Thank you. Question, Mr. John Wilton.
I just want to clarify. I appreciate your points. The distance between this operation and the school would be measured from the front door, and there are more than 500 feet.
Well, there's different ways that it's measured. The 200 feet went from the front door, the quickest pedestrian access. The quickest pedestrian access was 200 and something feet. I don't remember exactly, 240, 245, something like that. So why do you have this standard, the 200 and something feet is okay? And you just said it's more than 500 feet to go from the front door of that store all the way around the block to the front store of the daycare center. Why the two different standards? You have a daycare center within about 250 feet from that store. That's far less than 500 feet. So, I mean, you're talking about, you're splitting hairs here. The law says 500 feet is a felony, and that daycare center is well within 500 feet from that facility.
Okay, I guess the point is the distances that are required by the law are all met. And the petitioner made an allowance, and we've added a condition to it that they would provide a site blocking fence. So when you're at that school, you won't be able to look at that building and know what goes on in there at all. So kind of the effective view would be just another industrial building.
Well, I think, again, it's the letter of the law. I think the law is a little screwed up because in one sense it says 500 feet, that's a felony. Explain that to the person who's arrested for a felony at 500 feet, and then you're telling me that it's okay for the store to be within 500 feet and it's fine.
Mr. Wilton?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There are no other questions. Thank you. Anyone else wish to testify, please come forward. Welcome to the meeting.
Thank you. Jana Waldstein, attorney for the petitioner. Just to address a couple points. If you turn to page 8 of your packet, you'll see it's 200 foot measured from the lot line, closest lot line to the daycare to the lot line of the daycare, and it's far over the 200 feet. And then from the front door, walking down Arlen, where we put up that site obscuring fence, it's 567 feet to the daycare. I do appreciate the concerns, and I do love the fact that marijuana gets people involved in community issues, and I think that's one of the positive things that marijuana does. I will concede that obviously this is still illegal under federal law, but 95% of our population lives in a state where marijuana is now legal. So the trend is moving forward, and Anchorage is just part of that progression. I would love to give you a packet explaining our the testifiers here, explaining our tracking policies and our diversion and inversion plan that we have to follow strictly. Marijuana is tracked from seed to sale on the cultivation level, and then that marijuana gets turned into a concentrate, and it is again tracked in the concentrate form. And then that concentrate form is put into products, and those are called production lots, which are all tracked by the state of Alaska through a software system called Metric. Everything is accounted for. If there's even 5 grams missing, AMCO's immediately at your door or calling you and letting you know, hey, you're on hold, everything is frozen, you can't transfer a single product out of your facility until we come and we understand why you're missing some grams. When it comes to the statement about maybe a retail consumer would take product and sell it to a high schooler, well, enforcement for AMCO is on this. They're asking for pictures of actual products that my clients are making, and they're creating a spreadsheet. So the school board, is my understanding, is if something is found in a school that's a marijuana product, they're going to send a picture of it to AMCO to cross-reference to see if it's in the actual spreadsheet produced by one of our licensed clients or licensed applicants. And that should hopefully cut down on any type of sales, or at least bring it to the attention, and then retail stores can be more aware of this issue. So far to date, there hasn't been any. There has been some from Seattle in Bethel, and that's come to our attention, and our testing labs are going to step up and hopefully help out the school board in determining, if there is THC in those gummy bears, which we can't produce gummy bears. It's too familiar to candy in this state, but in Seattle they're doing it. So I really hope that addresses some of your concerns, and I know it probably doesn't address all of them, but I'm happy to answer any questions that the Assembly may have.
Question from Assembly members. Thank you, ma'am, for your testimony. Anybody else wishing to testify, please come forward. Anyone at all? Hearing and seeing no testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
I move to approve.
Second.
Mr. Wilton, anything else, sir? Is your committee that had a hearing on this?
We did. On the Community Economic Development Committee, we met last week and looked at this, and this is kind of the third part of this operation, that location, and looked at it carefully, and we did address the distance issues, which were very significant in this one. There was the fencing issue with the site obscuring fence was done to kind of address the fact that kind of daycare does feel very close to the operation, and this does separate it kind of visually, makes it almost an irrelevant building. And it does meet all the requirements for separation distances. I do have a question, though, for staff, perhaps Ms. Winter-Pearson. I think the meetings and so on were legally noticed from our seats, but they were given wrong information apparently from a planning department. Is there any recourse in those cases?
That's a good question. I think that from where I sit, what I understand is that notice procedures were followed as set by the code. The notices were issued for the initial public hearing date. You all opened the public hearing and then continued it to the next hearing date, which you did on the record appropriately, which did not require further public notice. I can't speak to the information that was given by the planning department, but all documentation that was produced on your website, was produced in this meeting, was produced in advance of the meeting, did accord with, to my knowledge, with the requirements of the code. So I think it's perhaps what we could do is perhaps circle back to how that information is communicated within the planning department to understand, to make sure that that information is correctly communicated to anyone who may inquire about what has happened. From what what we participated in here, comported with the notice provisions in the code.
Well, I think at our next meeting, we should have that on the agenda, kind of discussion of how the planning department gets their dates to make sure this doesn't happen again, because it's not right. So,
thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Mr. Constant, sir, on this issue.
Yeah, thank you. A couple of things. If I'm remembering correctly, this was the discussion where we closed the public hearing and then reopened the public hearing to continue it. So we actually allowed for twice the public hearing than would normally have occurred. And so not only did we have it open, but we opened it again for another meeting. And so we had 2 full public opportunities to come testify on the retail licensure. And I think that's actually ample and more than any other applicant for a marijuana license that I've seen. But to the administration, I'm not sure who the proper person is to talk to. I think that I heard the concern about the school bus stop 2 or 3 times. And it seems to me that if this does go through, we might make a recommendation to the school district to consider moving this bus stop closer to the daycare and further from the entrance of the marijuana license place. Because moving a school bus stop is pretty simple. We're not talking major infrastructure. So I make that recommendation.
You might bring that up at our Friday meeting with the school board, too. Mr. Dunbar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I first wanted to sort of identify myself with the remarks made by Mr. Weddleton regarding our ability to enforce these things and the fact that the marijuana industry thus far in Anchorage has been very free of problem. I mean, there's certainly been issues, but it's actually been pretty remarkable. And I think a lot of that is because they know that we have this ability to pull back these licenses. But I also wanted to briefly address what the gentleman who testified spoke to about the church. And I'm not familiar with that incident. I wasn't here when that church was being approved. I mean, we don't approve churches, but whatever the construction they were trying to do. But I'll just say that had I been on the body and had they complied with all the building requirements and zoning requirements and all the other various regulations we put upon them, I believe that I would have voted to allow that construction to go forward. Again, I can't speak to the specifics of the case, so maybe there was some other thing that was happening there. But these marijuana facilities have a tremendous amount of regulations that they have to account for and be compliant with. And, you know, we have a duty as a body not to be arbitrary and capricious. When an organization, be they a church or a marijuana store or another place that requires a bunch of parking, when they come to us and they can prove that they have met our regulations, then in almost every case we should follow the letter of the law. Now, in this particular case, I do want to commend Mr. Weddleton and Mr. Domboski and the other people on the Community Economic Development Committee that worked with the landowner and have agreed to build this site obscuring fence, which I think will be beneficial to the neighborhood. But again, they have complied with the law, and barring some kind of very significant problem or deviation, I think that we should follow the letter of the law, and so I intend to vote for approval. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Dombrowski, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I had a question for one of the lawyers sitting over there. Becky, maybe you can help. When we're talking about, I don't know if the federal safe schools issue, I remember when we passed these laws, the Department of Law recommended we stick with 1,000 feet, specifically when we're talking about schools. But does that law apply to daycares too, or is it specifically schools? I thought it was schools, but I want to make sure I'm correct.
That's a good question. I'm not sure of the answer. I can look quickly. I think that my legal colleagues appear to be.
They both are feverishly Googling, I think. And, I'll just.
While Ms. Peltroni is looking, I would like to say that my understanding of that so far has been that federal law applies to schools. That definition didn't include daycares, but I haven't actually looked that up. But that's been my understanding all along. It's schools, and that's why we have drug-free school zones. I haven't heard of a drug-free daycare zone, so I believe it's only elementary, middle, high schools, and that's where the 1,000-foot range comes from. And it's generally an aggravating circumstance in a federal crime that bumps it up to a felony if there's illegal drugs within that 1,000-foot buffer zone.
Right, that was my understanding too, and it's just been a couple of years since we've drafted these laws, so I just wanted to be sure, because I'm going to have another issue with one of the applicants tonight, because they're very close to a school. But I want to make sure we understand, as we have this discussion, the difference between that potential aggravating factor between a daycare and a school, and make sure we are correctly understanding what the law is when they consider it. Okay, so the lawyers are all confident. I don't know who to look at. I'm so sorry.
No problem. Certainly, based on the quick research we've all done here, I believe that
And that's not a bad thing.
the restriction applies to, it looks like, public or private elementary schools, vocational or secondary schools, public or private college, junior college or university or playground, housing facility owned by a public housing authority, or public or private youth center, public swimming pool, or video arcade facility. I'm not certain what the jurisprudence is on whether or not a daycare center qualifies as a public or private youth center. Yeah.
I'm sorry, just point of order. Was that state law you were referring to?
This is federal law.
Federal law.
I think the long and short of it is, for a comprehensive answer on this issue, we'd probably need more than 2 minutes, and could certainly look into it to provide further guidance on the issue.
Rebecca, there was an issue that came up with us year or so ago on 88th. It was a judo school. It was actually a driving school that applied to the Marijuana Control Board because it said nowhere a school, and they determined that was not technically a school.
Mm-hmm.
It was a driving school, but it was not an Anchorage School District building.
Mm-hmm.
So they turned them down on that case. Anything else, Mr. Bowski?
No, I'm just going to say, this was one of the first permits that I clearly felt this was too close to a daycare. I was very critical. That's the reason it got delayed. It's because I was adamant that I was concerned. And it comes back to this level of confusion that happens because of the way they measure. We had planning staff who are impeccable people, very detailed, but we would send staff out to one location, and they'd go out 3 times and get 3 different measurements because of how they were measuring the separation distance. And that's why, from my perspective, I thought the cleanest, easiest way to do it was to measure the separation distance from lot line to lot line. That's how we do it in Eagle River because it makes sense, frankly. And there's no ambiguity when you do it that way. Unfortunately, the way the law was drafted and passed here in Anchorage, the separation distance is only 500 feet, which was against the Department of Law's recommendation of a 1,000-foot separation distance between protected land uses, and schools are in there. But the other thing, it's measured by the shortest practicable walking route. So it's not lot line to lot line. So even though you're standing at the back of the lot and you say it's only 200 feet, the way the law was drafted here in Anchorage, in the bowl, it really is counted as 567 feet because they had to build a fence and they had to make it site obscuring and they had to make it basically so it was beyond that 500 feet. So technically, do they meet the limits of the law? The way the Anchorage has drafted it, yep, they do. But we as legislators have a responsibility, I think, to consider the public impact, and that's why this particular licensee it still bothers me, frankly, to this day, because I think it's really, really close. Now, the differentiation in my mind is exactly the question I asked. When I think of a safe school zone, I'm thinking of an elementary school, a middle school, a high school. I'm thinking of a school. I'm not thinking of a daycare center. And it has been my understanding all along that that a daycare center is not the same as, Abbott Loop Elementary School. And that's the way I understood it when I drafted it. I hope our new city attorney can kind of delve into this and make sure that going forward we understand it, make sure we're right. But on this particular applicant, it is a daycare. They have attempted to meet every one of our conditions. So it's challenging, but this is, again, part of the reason why we wanted to maintain as much control on the assembly as possible, because if they become a problem in your neighborhood, I will tell you right now, I have no reservations to take their license. Because I think the community impact is frankly more important, is the most important thing. And I think this is why I scrutinize every single one of these applications, and if they were at 499 feet, there's no way on God's green earth I would vote for an applicant like this, because I just think the community impact has to be considered. And even if they meet the letter of the law, there have been applicants and other issues that we've taken liquor license, we've done other things from them because they weren't conducive to the neighborhood. And I would just recommend that you are very, very astute to any of these that go into your neighborhood and communicate with us clearly, especially every year they have to come back for a renewal, which means they're going to have a public hearing especially if we have somebody who's communicated with us that we're concerned about this licensee, we can pull it and set it for a public hearing. So we want to hear from you. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Any other comments from assembly members? If not, please vote. That's approved 9-2. Next item in front is item 14H, Resolution AR 2017-378, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving marijuana licensing and special land use permit for marijuana retail sales establishment with license number M10646, Ferguson and Smith Enterprises Incorporated, doing business as Green Room, AK, located at 610 C Street, Unit A7. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wishing to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Spell your last name and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no one, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of I?
Move to approve. Second.
Mr. Whittleton, I think this came to your committee?
Right. We reviewed this last week very carefully, and it meets all the requirements, and we recommended approval.
Discussion from Mr. Constant.
Yeah, thank you very much. Just wanted to forward the comments from the Downtown Community Council. They worked pretty closely with this organization. The group came to them over a year ago and sought the input of the council, but because of changes at the council asked them to come back again in the last month, and they did. And the council, working through their neighborhood responsibility planning process with them, determined they had no conflicts, no complaints about this applicant, and they're okay with it. So, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Wilton, anything else, sir?
No, thank you.
Ms. Nabowski, ma'am. You were on the queue.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I was feverishly looking. If I could, I'd like the applicant to come forward.
Could you identify yourself for the record so we can...
Yep. I'm Adam Ferguson, the president of Ferguson Smith Enterprises.
Catherine Ferguson.
Orlo Smith.
Okay, Ms. Nabowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So you've heard the robust discussion this evening about where a school is located.
Yes, the Vail School.
Sure. I'm not 100% familiar with Vail. Clearly, I know it's an ASD school, but I believe it's an alternative school. Have you been in contact at all with the Anchorage School District or any parent association with that school?
I have not. They were outside of the 500-foot distance where I had to send letters to all the people and residents. They're a secondary alternative school, I suppose kind of like SAVE.
You've heard the discussion here tonight, and, I'll be very frank with you. I get very concerned, and I'm trying to think in my past. I've given people warnings before when they were within a certain distance. You are under the recommended Department of Law distance of 1,000 feet. So you recognize that the federal government could come in tomorrow and shut you down. The day you open, you could be opening yourself up because you are, even though the Assembly went against the guidance of legal counsel and said, okay, in Anchorage, you only have to be 500 feet. I really like to emphasize to people that, I'm trying to think if this is the actual first brick and mortar school that I've seen somebody within that 1,000-foot distance. So I just really want to emphasize, the risk you're taking.
I understand that. I mean, technically, they could come in and shut us all down.
Oh, absolutely, they could. And, that's the risk you take when you get into this. But I think you really are in an elevated position simply because you're in a drug-free school zone.
Correct.
So I just want to put that out there. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bosky. Other comments from Assembly members?
Can I finish I just didn't have anything else for them. I just wanted to make Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. There's no other questions for you. Mr. Bosky.
Hollyweed brought up a real conundrum for me, and it was a challenge because I think I've been incredibly fair, and I try to treat all the applicants the same. And sometimes location, in my view, sometimes just, even if they meet every single box, I sometimes feel like sometimes the location is just not appropriate. And it wouldn't be just for a marijuana location. But I really do have great concerns that this body made the decision to allow marijuana establishments within drug-free school zones. I think it was a bad decision. To this day, I don't agree with it. And so I find myself in that conundrum right now of, do you allow the applicant just to assume the risk? I do what I do like that on purpose because I want people on the record. So if somebody comes in and shuts them down, they can never go back and say, well, we had no idea. And clearly, they've gone through this process. They're very capable people, obviously, to navigate the municipality in our process. So I think they do know the risk, but I do that on purpose, and it's a little redundant. But I've turned a corner in my evaluation of marijuana licenses in that I think if somebody is within 1,000 feet of a brick and mortar school, they're no longer an applicant that I can support. And it comes down to, what do I value more? Do I value more the safety and security of children in a drug-free zone, or do I value more giving an opportunity to a business that's, frankly, a federally illegal endeavor? And frankly, I can't this time go with the applicant. I think it's just not a good location. So I'm sorry to say that, but whenever we have these residential areas or, business districts that start bumping up upon certain locations, there won't be applicants that I'll be supporting moving forward. So I will be a no vote.
Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Dunbar, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say.
14H.
What's that, Mr.
On 14H.
Oh, yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess just very briefly, I'm not aware of I'm trying to think where the school exactly you're speaking of. It must be in one of these buildings.
Parking garage.
What's that?
It's in the parking garage.
It's in the parking
garage. Yeah, right, that's Easy Park.
425 C Street.
So we talk about the letter and spirit of the law. They've conformed with the letter of our law. In terms of protecting children, I mean, I'm just looking at their position. They happen to be basically immediately between three different bars. Although one of them, I think Crush just moved. But there are three bars within less than a block of this location. So I just find that kind of rhetoric a little bit puzzling, and I will support this application.
Thank you, Mr. Dunbar. Mr. Constant, sir.
Yeah, thank you. And this, again, is a question for the school board, probably, or the city administration. But it's interesting, the Avail school there, the Saves, what is it? The Avail doesn't actually have posted around a drug-free school zone. And in fact, all over the neighborhood around the schools, they do have them posted, but that one doesn't. And I don't know, it does? I have not seen these signs. All right, so I'm mistaken? It's good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Mr. Croft, sir.
I guess what I was thinking about during the discussion was, we're a better arbiter, we're closer to the ground than the federal government is on what is and isn't safe in our community. And I think there should be a limit to our deference to their thousands of miles away determination of what we ought to do. We can legitimately disagree here about whether it's appropriate or how far, whether it should be 500 or 1,000, but saying just because the federal government did it isn't a good enough answer for our public safety needs. We can disagree, and that we tend to do respectfully and think about it, and maybe we convince each other. But I just don't think that blanket federal law should be the determiner for us. I've, participated, I think when Mr. Dyson and I were serving together, when we stood up to the federal government on them taking away fishing and hunting licenses. And we just said, it was a federal law, and we said, we're not going to comply with it. Thank you very much. Kind of called their bluff, and they gave us waivers, which we didn't ask for, I think, and then finally they capitulated. But maybe next time they don't. But we still should insist that we define areas we're competent to, and I think this is certainly one of them. So the defining factor for Ms. Dembowski simply isn't much of a factor at all for me.
Ms. Dembowski, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Shot at this?
Thank you. I really appreciate the comments of the members, and just for clarity, I want to be very clear. My comments are not rhetoric. They're a real concern of people in the community that if you put a marijuana establishment within 1,000 feet of a school, it's too close. It has nothing to do, in my community, for example, my community has designated protected land uses and residential areas, and many situations with marijuana establishments should be 2,000 feet. So to Mr. Croft's point, I'm not going on some arbitrary federal law, though the federal drug-free school zones are clearly referenced at 1,000 feet often. What I'm saying is 500 feet is too close for me to a school. Not the federal government. It's not empty rhetoric. It's a concern that's shared with many Alaskans and many Anchorage residents. And it happens to be my district have been very adamant that they think it should be much bigger than 1,000 foot. But I'm just saying, after a lot of marijuana licenses and reviews, I've come to the point after reevaluating and contemplating and introspectively looking to what I'm comfortable with, and I am not comfortable with putting marijuana establishments within 1,000 feet of a school.
Thank you, Ms. Dembowski. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We're on 14H.
14H, right.
Sorry.
We've got slightly differences of opinions in the way we look at some of these things. From my point of view, we have got illegal black market grow operations all over town. And there could be illegal black market grow operations right across the street from an elementary school or a high school or a middle school. Legalized marijuana, you will not even get in the door unless you've got an ID that shows you're 21 years of age. So I think there's an excess amount of paranoia going on about people being worried about whether a shop is located 500 feet or 1,000 feet from an elementary school or from a protected use area. I think the point that we should be making is that legalized marijuana can only be bought with an ID, and if your ID doesn't look 100% kosher, they're not going to sell it to you because they don't want to take a chance of losing their license over a mistaken sale. So they're going to be standing on the side of caution and not selling to anyone who they think might be under the age of 21. So this is a discussion that we actually probably started 3 years ago, and every once in a while it just comes back around to the surface again. And so here it is tonight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any other comments from assembly members? They may have dropped you off because I saw one there disappear. They're no longer there. So please vote. That item was approved 11 to 1.
10 to 1.
10 to 1, sorry. Can't even count. Apologize. Next item in front is item 14I, Resolution AR 2017-378 or 379, a resolution of the Anchorage Municipal Assembly approving a marijuana license and special land use permit for marijuana cultivation facility with license number M10107, Ferguson and Smith Enterprises, Inc., doing business as Arctic Earth, located at 151 A Street, Loop. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward. State your name clearly for the record. Spell your last name if you would. Tell us what town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying no public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Second.
Discussion from assembly members. Ms.
Mr.
Dombrowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So by way of history, I see a couple other members jumping in the queue, so I just wanted to explain this. The Chugiak Eagle River Senior Center is a contractor on municipal property.
Ma'am, we're on still the marijuana license.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry.
I thought that was going to get really interesting there for a
Are
second.
they allowed to
I
have a
thought
retail?
maybe they were selling it there, Amy. Gets rid of the arthritis pains. Okay. Mr. Wilton, sir.
We looked at this at the Community and Economic Development Committee last week carefully, and it meets all the requirements, and we recommended approval.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Whittleton. Please vote before I get in trouble. That's approved unanimously, 10 to nothing.
11.
Okay, 11 to nothing. Sorry. Okay, now we're down to this item, Mr. Vasquez, item 14J. Public hearing is now open. Item 14J, ordinance AO 2017-152, ordinance waiving rezone application fees for retail for real property legally described as Lot 3.
Waive reading.
Section 16. Thank you. This is for operation and expansion of the Chugiak Eagle River Senior Center. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward and give us, spell your name, give us your last name, tell us what town you live in. No. Hearing and saying no until testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Mr. Bowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, I do believe the senior center tries to be as green as possible. Just throw it out there.
Should we go check the plan?
No, I just wanted, by way of discussion, I wanted to, first of all, I really have to thank Chris Schutte and Robin Ward for helping, resolve this issue. What happened, the Chugiak Eagle River Senior Center, they're managed by contractors, clearly, that run the senior center, that maintain it, but it's on municipal property. And this particular lot is a municipal lot. It's next door to their facility. And many years ago, I can't remember exactly which year off the top of my head, but before Title 21 was rewritten, the senior center contractor signed a 50-year lease in order to build more senior housing at the lot next door. Then we went ahead and changed Title 21 and changed the allowable uses on our own property. And lo and behold, nobody caught it. The assembly, it was a total mistake. So this happened. The senior center has got their grants. They go forward because they're going to go ahead and build senior housing. The planning department says, oh no, sorry, that's not an allowable use anymore. Oops, we kind of stepped in it. So Chris took the bull by the horns and is working to mitigate this issue right now. Part of the problem, like I said, this is municipal property. Clearly what we're asking is to waive all municipal fees because they have to rezone it now. And they have to rezone our own property, which to me is kind of crazy. So this part right here is the part that will waive the actual municipal fees that are established in our codes. And the administration is working right now to try to mitigate any private cost for the architecture, for the people to run through the process. So I don't know. Did I cover it pretty well, Chris? So hopefully you guys can support this, but don't be surprised if something maybe on the tail end comes back about this rezone, because like I said, it is municipal property. It was unintended consequence, frankly, of changing the use designation within Title 21 when we did it. And they had already been locked into a 50-year land lease to specifically build this from us.
Thank you, Mr. Dombrowski. Mr. Constant, sir, on this item.
Yeah, just briefly, it sounds like, and there's no language in here, that this is one of those unanticipated consequences of the change Title 21. So it seems like a pretty clear case.
Thank you, Mr. Constant. Before we vote, any other comments from Assembly members? If not, please vote. That was approved 11-0 by the body. Next item in front of us, item 14K, Resolution AR 2017-373, resolution of the municipality of Anchorage, Alaska, appropriating $275,000 from Port of Alaska Fund 7000, unrestricted fund replacement street sweeper, and the revised 2017 Port CIB. Public hearing on this item is now open. Anybody wish to testify, please come forward, state your name, for the record, spell your last name, and tell us what part of town you live in. Anyone at all? Hearing and saying none, public testimony is closed. What's the wish of the body?
Move to approve.
Moved and seconded. Discussion from Assembly members. Please vote. That's approved 11-0. That completes our agenda. We're now down to special orders. There are none. Reserve, there is none. Audience participation. Is there anybody that would like to address the Assembly on any item for 3 minutes? Anyone at all? You know you can't resist it.
I can't. My name's Ed Larrabee, and of course I live around the Falker area. And I'm worried that there's not going to be enough ice and snow removal, because I don't want to experience what I did last time. People, I don't slide, but it seems like everybody else does, and they always have bigger cars than mine. So it would be really nice if you guys could, you don't have to use salt, just use sand, and after you scrape the ice. And that will prevent death. I'm thinking about life. And also I'll prevent hardship. Nobody wants a wrecked car around Christmas. Bah, humbug. Look, we need to work on it now. We need to get it while it's coming, because there's a bigger storm coming. And it's going to make, anybody that lives out in Eagle River or past, it's going to make it a challenge. Now, tomorrow, it will be a challenge. And we need to have those roads scraped and sand. And if you don't, you're gonna get a lot of people upset because they just wrecked their, $35,000 new car? We got to work on this now. Not wait. Let's wait till after everything. These roads are going to freeze up. They're froze up now. So if I were you, I would make sure this problem's solved, because anybody that's going to run against you is going to bring this up. They're not going to blame, cops are taking too much money. No, they're not going to blame them. They're going to blame y'all and the mayor. My name's Ed Larrabee. That's how
Don't go anywhere yet.
Oh, okay.
Ms. Dombrowski, you have a question, ma'am?
No, sir. I'm in queue for under Assembly member comments.
Okay. Mr. Dunbar, you have a question for this gentleman.
I just wanted to make sure that he was aware that on Monday, December 18th, from 6 to 7:30 p.m., we're having a town hall meeting about snow removal at Wonder Park Elementary School. So myself, the chair, Senator Wielechowski, will have people from State DOT and Muni snow removal and street maintenance. We'd love to have you there with your thoughts and
if I can get there. It just depends on my cancer doctor. Every time I stick my nose out the door, he says, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't do that."
Well, if you're able to, if your cancer doctor approves, Monday, December 18th, 6 to 7:30 p.m. at Wonder Park Elementary School.
From 6 to 7.
6 to 7:30,
6 to 7:30.
Wonder Park
Okay, and
Elementary.
where's Wonder Park?
It's in beautiful East Anchorage, off Boniface.
Oh, on base? Nah,
Off
I can't do it.
Boniface. Off Boniface.
Oh, off Boniface? Is it marked? Is there anything near it?
Russian Jack Park?
Boy, that's dangerous. Anything else?
No, I think my colleagues have had about enough of me.
Ah, no, you're great. You keep me entertained.
Thank you for your test.
Thank you all. You all be safe going home. Drive slow. Wear your seatbelt. If I could put a helmet on each one of you, I would.
All right, thank you. I appreciate my colleagues being patient with me as I'm learning this new job and responsibility. I have three things I wanted to comment about. I have observed that we in Anchorage are dealing with a lot of problems that are not of our own origin or that we don't have the authority to deal with. This last week, Peters Creek froze. It has several times over the last 3 or 4 decades I've been paying attention. And it froze from the bottom up, as often happens, and then jumped its banks and was in the yards and a little bit in the basements of some of the local residents. Pretty impressive. Under existing law, we, the local authorities, are very limited in what we can do within a recognized stream bed. This is a responsibility here in our area of DNR state and the Soil and Waterways Division of that. With the state reductions in funding, that entire function and its staff went away in our area. So when the creek jumped its beds and was in Miss Demonsky and I's constituents' yards and houses, nobody had the authority to do anything, and that was pretty frustrating. So anyways, the upshot of it was 100,000 phone calls nearly were made, and everybody trying to figure out who to do what. And finally, Mother Nature, or providentially, the temperatures warmed up and the creek cut its way back to the bottom and so on. But many people were looking for solutions. Mr. Schutte here kind of appears to me to have taken the bull by the horns and gotten a hold of the relevant state people, and there's a plan going forward for that we will get the necessary permits to get in the creek bed between the times when the fish go upstream and the fry come downstream, and get the work done, rechannelizing the creek, putting some berms along the edge to try to encourage the darn thing to stay there, and for the state to have an in-place authority, chain of command, and capacity to deal with it. But it's one of those unfortunate consequences when everybody thinks that the way to solve all financial crises is to cut everything. You know, it gets to some point where it hurts and public safety is involved. Anyways, Mr. Schutte, along with Mr. Abbott, are two of several people in this administration that impressed me with a can-do attitude, and I appreciate it. I'm suspicious that Mr. Abbott was smart enough to fool me, but I'm not sure of that. Secondly, when we were doing our budget discussions here, the city manager, perhaps with a little bit of irony or glee, asked me if I was going to cut the flowers in Eagle River. And I said I hadn't thought about it or considered it, and I felt like there was a little bit of glee at exposing my hypocrisy, and perhaps that of Ms. Dembowski, who supported me. I since went back to confirm what I had suspected. all of the beautification efforts in Eagle River were done with private money, Chamber of Commerce and citizens groups to do that, and it's all maintained by volunteers. I asked the Parks and Rec director if there was any city funds going to it, and she said there might have been $200 or $300 worth of flowers that were donated to the effort. So my instincts were correct that there was no conscious hypocrisy on our part, and the effort was, so that was kind of fun to discover I was actually right on something, which rarely happens. The third thing I want to talk about is far sadder. 5 days ago, a dear friend, Art Hippler, was involved in a car wreck out in the valley. He survived the wreck, was out walking around. 18 hours later, he lost control of his legs. And it progressed. He's been in ICU out at Providence, where I've been visited and so on. He died at 5 this morning. And Art is one of those fascinating people that it's been my privilege to know. He a couple of PhDs, the last one from Berkeley. While he was there, actually at a time when I was in Berkeley as well, he was a hired member, operative for the Progressive Labor Party, and those of you know their Marxist history, that's the Trotskyite denomination, and very active in left-wing affairs there. He was a very impressive-looking person, scary bright, arrogant, irritating, and a delight. And I've known him since late 60s when he was on the staff at the University of Alaska Fairbanks. And he, like most honest intellectuals, was not capable of fooling himself for a long period of time. He got disenchanted with Marxist theory because, as he would say, there's no data to support any success, and the track record is abominable. And he moved away from his extreme position to become a very thoughtful person that most of you would think of as center-right. And he would gallop through my life every few months and say something offhand that would set me back on my heels and have me thinking for months and sometimes years and reevaluating. He considered himself to be what I would consider myself to be, and that's a classic liberal, the kind of folks that led our country away from the tyranny of inherited offices and great centralized power. He was a refuge for what I consider to be clear-thinking college students, both in Fairbanks and here, was a major part of ICER for a number of years, and just a lot of fun to be around. He started a secret organization I'll never tell you about. It's been operated, and it has been considered to be a caucus of free-range curmudgeons that meet to plot against the order of our time, and so on. When he knew that his paralysis was permanent, and it was progressing, and he was losing his ability to breathe, he called all of his kids and family. I hope that somebody kept records of those conversations. But he decided that not being able to control his bodily functions and having an air hose stuck down his trachea was not something he was interested in doing, and I encouraged them to cut off the ventilator, and they did. After Art started thinking more clearly about his presuppositions, he reasoned his way to his conviction that there were transcendent values, that life and time had a beginning and was moving down a course, time has arrows, and that the process he went through over several years that led him back to his Catholic faith was a valid one. I watched this delightful guy debate several people on it, and I remember an amazing debate with 4 or 5 college professors, and he said the following: the most important thing any human being has to think about is whether or not there is transcendent truth. And if there isn't, that's fine. You know, you can go do anything you want. If there is, then you have a moral responsibility to pursue that truth wherever it leads. And he said, if you believe there is not any transcendent truth, then he said, from this moment forward, you must forever forswear telling anybody they ought to or ought not to do anything, because you can't answer the question, who says, or on what basis. And the only reason that you can go forward with thinking that your idea is superior is to do what every tyranny and every Marxist organization has had to do, and that's by live by power and fear. And Art, as I said, was irritating, but being on the bad end of a debate with him was a significantly unpleasant decision. He has children who, well, the one I know the best has 2 and soon be 3 PhDs and teaching in the Ivy League. And yeah, so I'm missing my friend. I will probably miss the stimulation that he gave me as he galloped through my life every few months and so on. But I believe we here in Alaska have lost a significant voice and presence, and thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dyson. Mr. Will, do you have a question, Mr. Dyson? John?
Not exactly a question, just some follow-ups, though that's very, very hard to follow up with. Should I go ahead, or?
No, I'll get down to you.
Okay.
Ms. Dembowski? We normally don't have time to do this. Ms. Dembowski?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I want to just say a huge thank you, an epic response to Mr. Mayor for answering my cell phone call. What I realized when Peters Creek was flooding was I did not have Mr. Falsey, the city manager's cell phone number, so I called the chair, who also did not have it, and I thought, wait a minute, I have the mayor's cell phone number. So I called him, and he quickly, lickety-split, got on the job, and Mr. Schuette very quickly responded, because I hope you're feeling better. Mr. Falsey was sick last week. But I just have to truly commend the administration. The response that I received was phenomenal. That night, as I was standing there with my boots on the road in 6 inches of water, Mr. Schuette was all over it. He was calling everybody he could think of. We had state legislators that were calling, and John Rada, the Parks and Rec director, left his home in Eagle River, and he was watching a game. And he left the game to come down and check it out so he could give Mr. Schuette a firsthand account of what was going on. And the very next day, Eagle River Street Maintenance, Mr. Schuette had them come out, grade the road, kind of ditch a little bit to divert the water off of the road, because Peters Creek clearly, not only was it flooding residential properties, but it was actually running down Aurora Borealis. And so I was so thrilled with the response, and I just wanted to say thank you. A really phenomenal job. Not only does Mr. Schuette have the coolest shoes, he is phenomenal when it comes to being responsive, and he just truly deserves all the credit for that solution that day. And I want to say thank you.
And a quick point of order, we can't forget Mr. Schuette's socks.
Oh, the socks. And lastly, I just want to say, I'll try to do this without crying. We lost a young man this week. I'm sorry. Sylvester Smith was a UAF student in the petroleum engineering program, who was an ASD graduate, and he was a good Samaritan driving home to UAF from Thanksgiving, and he stopped to help somebody just out of Clear, and he was killed.
He was my daughter's roommate, and I couldn't let tonight go by without telling his family. We all loved him, and we're very sorry for your loss.
Thank you, Ms. Dombrowski. Mr. Constant, comment?
Just thank you to everybody. Very interesting job.
Mr. Peterson, sir.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I want to say to Amy and Fred, I'm sorry to hear about the loss. Friends are like family when you've had that friend for a long period of time. So I actually was going to talk about something less heady. I actually attended the 40th annual session of the Great Alaska Shootout since our last meeting, and unfortunately it was the last Great Alaska Shootout, and the games were fantastic, and there was a good crowd there, and a good time was had by all, but unfortunately it looks like it's the end, and so now us basketball fans are going to have to try to find other ways to take care of our basketball addiction. So anyway, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Croft, sir. No assembly comments, thank you. Mr. Dunbar, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No comments this evening.
Melissa France, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My condolences as well to Ms. Dombrowski and to Mr. Dyson. And thank you, Mr. Dyson, for such a thoughtful reflection. I appreciate it.
Mr. Steele, sir.
No comments, Chair.
Mr. Rivera, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No comments.
Mr. Whittleton, sir.
Two. And one is to just, I guess both bounce off Mr. Dyson's comments, but we had also in South Anchorage a creek jump its bank, and that was Rabbit Creek near at Buffalo near DeArmond. And it's not the first time, and that is also a situation where who's in charge and who can do what, when, where. It's outside of the Anchorage Road Drainage Service Area. It's far too big a fix for the small service area to handle. The traffic that uses that road comes from all across the hillside to bring their kids to Golden View and through the neighborhoods up there. And it really does, we have been having discussions, but of a citywide stormwater utility, which would be looking at these things and kind of the bigger fixes to prevent these. The little patchwork things we're doing now are a huge amount of work. The city dove in and somehow justified spending the money there and fixing it, and I appreciate that. So it is a big issue across the city. And since we're talking about people who we've lost, Randy Burke, who worked for People Mover for many years, building the mostly bus stops around town was his main thing. He died in an avalanche 2 Wednesdays ago, and he and I were friends for decades. I chased him around on the ski trails for many, many years. And, when I learned one morning that he was the one who died that avalanche, of course I was sad about that. And I think my future is less full without him in it. But, I got to say, I was thinking about times with Randy, and I woke up laughing just thinking about things. And there was one thing, we did this wood ski race, which has gone on. I don't think they did it this year, but it's many years. It's a very casual race. You have to wear wood skis and heavy wool and all this kind of stuff. And they sent us through these crazy trails, through brush and everything. And I'm hanging with Randy Burke, which doesn't happen often. And we're heading up that hill to the chalet, and I'm hanging with Randy Burke, and I think I'm going to get him on this hill. And I was a little bit ahead of him. I was so excited. At the end, they gave us a balloon, and you had to blow up the balloon, tie it, and throw it into a bucket. So this is hard after you've been skiing, but I'm blowing it up, and I'm going to beat Randy Burke. He's right there blowing his up, and I'm almost got it, and he popped my balloon. So he beat me again. But, it's just stories like that. So he's just a great guy. There's a memorial ski race for him this Sunday at 4 o'clock at Service High, and I hope people would show up. He had impacted the ski community for many, many years, coached at Service High, and then, of course, through People Mover. You can't take a bus and get on and off a bus without being somewhere where he was. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Walton. Final comment to the body. I want to thank all you guys for being here tonight. What we do is a lot of different projects. Sometimes we get upset about it and the member's position on it, but it's just how we feel. We're responsible to our constituents, so I appreciate everybody's testimony on these issues. We deal with them. Now, we do have a meeting on Thursday from 10:30 to 12. It's a mandatory. In other words, we're taking attendance, so be there.
Yes,
Otherwise, you're not going to like not being there.
Yeah, I have a doctor's appointment at that time. It took me 3 months to schedule.
And bring me a note from your doctor.
Yep.
it's important that.
No, I understand, and I would like to have a briefing on the material from this meeting, because I understand how important it is, so thank
If we
you.
go into executive session, we can't. So that is going to be a problem. We have to figure out how to get around that, because we cannot discuss what goes on in the executive session. So,
So,
and I'll
you
have to
know,
ask Becky to give us a briefing on there, because we used to have the attorneys tell us, go to jail or we'll move you out of office. So she's got her text ready to go on that.
so my appointment, I believe, is at, let me see, 10 o'clock, so it would probably last until the first. If there's some kind of important action like that, I would love it if it were towards the middle end of the meeting.
So noted. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Second?
Second.
We're adjourned.